Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1081 Slipped. You're bloody looking to die. Old Master Chitian could tolerate it no more as he roared out into the sky, causing the world quake violently. Old Master Chitian was an immortal king no matter what. For him to face such a provocation from a junior, how could he possibly endure it? Even after being one-upped by Han Juntian, he could still forget about that. But, to think that even a young disciple would dare to come and holler at him with such bold words now. If he did not teach this kid a lesson, he would really not know the difference between heaven and earth. Lin Fan chuckled calmly, totally unbothered by everything happening in front of him. The old Master Chitian was truly pretty scary. If they were to just depend on their true skills, he might be killed by the other party in just a single breath. But, the situation was different right now. He was someone with resources. Whether or not I'm looking to die is not something that you get to decide, old trash Chitian. Also, it's not as though you've got a high chance of getting out alive today anyway. Lin Fan remarked calmly. Sweeping his sleeves, he placed a single hand behind his back as he clutched the Lin brand soap silently in his hands. That handsome face of old Master Chitian had long been scrunched up in anger thanks to Han Juntian. As for that third eye on his forehead, it was shining out with a bright beam of light that was locked onto Lin Fan. At that moment, the entire scene fell silent, everyone was waiting. While they did not know what the actual situation was like, they knew that old Master Chitian was hell-bent on slaying this junior disciple before his eyes right here. As to whether or not the senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect would actually do anything to rescue him, that was something no one would dare to bet on. Old Master Chitian had already made his words clear earlier on. If any of the senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect were to step out, the entire Kunlun God sect would duke it out with the Heaven and Earth sect till the end, even if it meant bearing the risk of being annihilated. That changed things entirely. If the Heaven and Earth sect and the Kunlun God sect were to really go at one another head-on, the eventual outcome was one that required no imagining. Both sides would definitely lose out heavily. By then, it wouldn't be impossible for the other sects to seize the opportunity and have the two trampled mercilessly beneath their feet. Heaven and Earth sect. Looking at everything before him, Qing Yangxi's heart was skipping furiously. He direly wished that he was at the scene right now to drag that lad away. Now that the situation was so treacherous, he was still spouting out threats in the face of old Master Chitian. Wasn't that just bloody courting death? Senior brother Lin is way too tyrannical. He's amazing. When Qing Yangxi heard those words, he barked out, amazing your A**s. He is bloody looking to die. What sort of a character is old Master Chitian? That is a powerful being of immortal king state. What does he even have to go up against the old Master Chitian with? Highs. That lad is really a ball of worries. That disciple lowered his head silently. Even though there was nothing wrong with what Elder Qing Yangxi had just said, he still could not deny that senior brother Lin was way too tyrannical. At this moment, Lin Fan was standing in the air without a single care for the world. Sweeping his robes gently, he seemed like he wasn't bothered by old Master Chitian in the slightest bit. He then curled his finger, come on. At this final moment of your life, hurry and burst forth with your most exceptional and glorious brilliance. I believe that once this is over, you're not going to have a chance to shine once more. At that instant, the entire world fell silent. Everyone present held their breath. In their hearts, this scene before them was simply way too tyrannical. This guy's brazenness completely knew no bounds. If it were any disciple in their own sects, they would have killed that disciple with their own hands at the first available moment. A disciple that was specialized in bringing trouble for the sect. Who in the world could stand that? Furthermore, this person before them was old Master Chitian. Who did he think he was? Old Master Chitian sucked in a deep breath of air. He felt as though he had lived his past thousands of years for naught, truly for naught. He boasted of a strong might and was an existence that everyone in the endless mainland would fear and respect. But, to think that a single junior would dare to act so brazenly in front of him. If he did not kill this junior right here, where was he supposed to place his face in the future? No, this kid must definitely not be allowed to live. He had to kill this kid for sure. Bam, taking a single step forward, old Master Chi Tien caused a series of circles of power to ripple out from the center of his foot in the air. Kid, your death has arrived. Today, no one will be able to save you. Old Master Chi Tien snorted out coldly. With a single heaven-encompassing palm, an unparalleled immortal art was deployed. The might of that immortal art was extraordinary and could shock the entire world across the time and space. That's the crushing gigantic palm. It was this single immortal art that had helped Han Juntian level up to his immortal king state just now. Right now, old Master Chi Tien is intent on using this move to have this disciple crushed to death. I wonder if those senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect would actually step in. But, I doubt they would do so. Right now, Han Juntian is already a powerful being of the immortal king state as well. Perhaps, he might choose to do it himself. Impossible, Han Juntian has been severely injured from what happened earlier. Even though he's at the immortal king state right now, he would definitely not step in. And even if he did, he wouldn't be able to hold out against this palm of old Master Chi Tien. The masses were rife in discussion about this matter. In their eyes, the Heaven and Earth sect had already taken an advantage out of this, so there was no reason for them to continue being so audacious any longer. But, who would have that this disciple did not have any intentions of retreating at all? Instead, he had decided to provoke old Master Chi Tien even more wantonly. They did not know what sort of resources this lad would have for him to dare to act as brazenly as such. When Han Juntian caught sight of this, his heart quivered. Naturally, there was no way he could have this lad die right here. He then cast his sight toward the endless void and hoped that the senior old masters would step in to resolve this situation. Grand Master, senior old masters. None of you step in. There's no way this old trash Chi Tien is able to do anything to me. Right now, Lin Fan was extremely excited. He was waiting, just a little more and it would be time for a miracle to be witnessed. There was no way he could allow anyone to destroy this perfect chance of creating a miracle. Han Juntian was flustered right now. He did not know just what this disciple wanted. Was he bloody trying to die? Old Master Chi Tien slapped down with his palm. What other capabilities does this lad have? Is he just going to depend on those immortal weapons floating behind him? Against a truly powerful being of the immortal king state, all of those immortal weapons were practically useless. Junior, go to hell, old Master Chi Tien roared out with a boundless might that descended down from the skies. That single palm seemed as though it could cover an entire world with its vastness and unmatched power. A single glance over was more than enough to rattle one's heart, sending an endless fear reaching into the depths of one's core. Lin Fan stood there and smiled calmly, unbothered with everything in the slightest bit. This exceptionally flamboyant and cocky disposition of his was one that had many people shaking their heads, and wanting to chop this guy up at the same time. This was just a momentary flash of brilliance. Who knew, this lad might just be taken down finally in the next second. There was completely no hope left right now. Even though the old Master Chi Tien had taken a loss, he was no weakling. But in that next split second, Lin Fan slowly took out the hand from behind his back before speaking out calmly. I have an item named soap. You can have it as a gift. Lin Fan chuckled before tossing the soap out. Flying through the air, the soap gave off a bedazzling glisten. When old Master Chi Tien caught sight of this item, his face changed. For some unknown reason, his hand suddenly reached out to grab it. Fragrant. A fragrant aroma conquered his nose. Snow white through and through, this was something special. Grabbing the soap in his hand, old Master Chi Tien's eyes shone with a strange glint. He could not figure out just what this was. Plop, all of a sudden, that soap slipped out of the hands of old Master Chi Tien. Looking at that soap floating gently in front of his feet, his heart skipped a beat. He was having a mysterious feeling. Chapter 1082 Flabbergasted. Chapter 1082, Flabbergasted. What's wrong? Everyone suddenly went quiet. The horrifying might exuded out in the void had dissipated as well. That single tremendous move of old Master Chi Tien had just disappeared midway all of a sudden, as though it had never once shown up. No one knew what exactly was going on. Lin Fan was just waiting right now. He did not know what the situation was going to be like either. Lin Brand's soap, it's all up to you now. If you were to succeed, you would be the most amazing from this day forth. And if you were to fail, you're going to have to cry for mercy alongside your daddy. The disciples of the Kunlun God sect were absolutely speechless right now as their gazes were fixed on old Master Chi Tian. They did not know why he had decided to stop all of a sudden. Did something happen? On the other side, old Master Chi Tian looked down at that soap in front of his feet that was filled with a strange seductiveness. He felt as though his inner heart had been called out by some mysterious attraction, as a bewitching voice rang out in his mind. Pick it up. This is your soap. Your soap has dropped onto the floor. You have to pick it up. Old Master Chi Tian was stunned as his right hand quivered. He felt as though he was about to go pick it up uncontrollably any time now. And yet, there was a nagging feeling that something was wrong about this. At that moment, the entire place fell silent. Old Master Chi Tian lowered his head and glared at the soap with a death stare. No one knew just what was going on with him right now. N-O-V-E in .c Ohm. Han Juntian was astounded at this moment as well, wondering what was going on. He wanted to ask Lin Fan just what in the world was thrown out, when all of a sudden, he realized that the latter's expression was even more serious than his own. It was as though Lin Fan was himself waiting for something to happen. Therefore, Han Juntian shut up and just waited quietly behind Lin Fan. If anything were to go astray, he would have to bail this disciple out no matter what. All the senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect who were in the void right now were just as astonished. In their eyes, there was something really wrong with this whole situation. They knew of the strength that old Master Chi Tian possessed. Not only that, his mental state was as resolute as the vast heaven itself, something that couldn't crumble no matter what. But why was he being attracted to such a strange object for such a long time? Strange. This was really strange. There must be some problem with this thing somewhere. Although, none of them could make out just what was different about this soap at all. At this moment, Lin Fan's heart skipped quickly. He could see that there was a thin thread coming out of the soap that coiled itself around old Master Chi Tian entirely. Not only that, there were many other thin threads that were floating between the heaven and earth, as though they were waiting for old Master Chi Tian's next move. Pick it up. Why aren't you bloody picking it up yet? Lin Fan screamed out in his heart. Hurry up, pick up the soap and lose your chastity. Hurry the FCK up. Lin Fan did not know what was going on with the situation right now. Could it be that old Master Chi Tian was so strong that he was able to fight back the effects of the soap? However, old Master Chi Tian's mind was whirling right now. The angle between his feet and the soap was 90 degrees. There was definitely something wrong with this position. In theory, he should take a step back before picking it up. But that was not right. He had to consider the position of his waist being bent over as well. If he were to face the south, he would be facing the disciples of the Kunlun God sect. The wisdom of the immortal kings was considered as the highest in the entire universe. Therefore, even a single angle would have them considering things from every single aspect to ensure that there were no problems at all. That's right, that should be the case. At this moment, old Master Chi Tian made a move that shocked everyone. He bent over, sticking up his bum, extending his hand, picking up the soap. That set of motions had no issues with them at all. FCK. It worked. When Lin Fan caught sight of this scene, his heart leapt with joy. This guy was FC King finally picking it up. What is old Master Chi Tian doing? I've got no idea. Just what in the world is that white object? Why is old Master Chi Tian trying to pick that up? Strange. This is way too strange. I don't even know what's going on at all. Just what is that Heaven and Earth sect disciple trying to do? Right now, Lin Fan's feelings were exceptionally excited. At that very moment when old Master Chi Tian had bent over to pick up the soap, all of the threads emanating out of the soap went berserk as they spread out toward all the disciples of the Kunlun God sect. Those threads had no material body, neither did they produce any form of ripples. Even if it were a powerful being of the immortal king state, they wouldn't be able to detect them at all. Lock. Tai Qianshan was locked down. When Tai Qianshan was locked by these invisible threads, that initially alarmed face of his took a stark change. Looking at the position old Master Chi Tian was in while bending down right now, he let off a berserk aura. Pishu. His entire body flashed out. Moving out swiftly, Tai Qianshan appeared beside old Master Chi Tian. Piok, piok. His left and right hands got to work as he slapped out on old Master Chi Tian's butt cheeks with an extremely weird smile on his face. Time to pick up your soap. ... Holy FCK. Just what in the world is that mother CKER trying to do? Mother ** C King Hell. Blind. I'm going to go blind. Who in the world can save me? What the hell is going on right now? Oh, good lord, what did I just see? What in the world just went into my eyes? What are old Master Chi Tian and Tai Qianshan doing? What are they trying to do? All the powerful beings hidden up in the void were stupefied right now. All the powerful beings in the various sects were all confounded. Han Juntian could only watch everything with his jaws wide open. Just what in the world was going on? But when he looked over at Lin Fan, he realized that the expression of this disciple had changed somewhat. He was now bearing an excited look on his face. Could all of this have been done by this disciple? Kunlun God Sect, Grand Master, Old Master. What are you guys doing? Don't do that, please, please don't do that. The face of the Kunlun God Sect is really entirely gone right now. Save us. Can someone come and save our Grand Master and Old Master? How could they put on such a pose? No. Some of the disciples from the Kunlun God Sect spat out mouthfuls of fresh blood. Looking at everything before them, their mental states could not help but feel rattled. There was completely no way for them to endure everything happening before their eyes right now. They were absolutely heartbroken. Was this still the Grand Master that was revered in the hearts of everyone right now? Was this still the Old Master that they all respected? Could they really not know what they were doing? In the depths of Tai Qianshan's consciousness, he was roaring out, "What the F***ck is going on here?" Even though those were the words his consciousness was screaming, the words that were mumbled out of his mouth right now were entirely different. Haha, I've finally seized the chance. You've finally picked up the soap. The heart of Old Master Qi Tian was the same as Tai Qianshan right now, unable to believe that he could do something like this. Yet, his mouth went. That's right, I've picked up the soap. You've seized the chance. ... When Lin Fan caught sight of this, his entire heart skipped with joy. His chance was here now. He then took another step forth and disappeared from where he was. Even though he really wanted to witness what was about to happen next, there would definitely not just be one of these senior old masters in the Kunlun God Sect. If some other senior old master were to head out, he would really have no choice by then. Even though this Lin brand's soap could be used 3 times, there was still only one of it. You two beasts. How dare you guys commit such an act under broad daylight? This is really a disgrace for our moral culture. Let me teach you guys a good lesson. Lin Fan appeared instantly before the two of them. Without waiting for the two of them to spout any crap, he took out the 9-5 legendary brick and slapped both of them unconscious immediately before tossing them into his heaven and earth smelt. Boom! Right at that moment, the entire Kunlun God Sect trembled violently, and a torrential might burst out. The other senior old masters were here. Lin Fan retreated immediately and hid behind Han Juntian. Grand Master, let's not retreat just yet. Let me see who the person coming out first is. Perhaps I can squeeze out even more benefits. Lin Fan remarked excitedly. Han Juntian looked at Lin Fan with an absolutely flabbergasted expression. Chapter 1083 No way of settling this. Chapter 1083. No way of settling this. Holy FCK, what is up with this situation? Where have Old Master Qi Tian and Tai Qianshan gone? Could both of them have been subdued by that fella? Horrifying. This is way too horrifying. This is probably going to be one of the biggest news in the entire Endless Mainland. Being able to witness this personally makes this trip totally worthwhile. At this moment, everyone was completely stupefied. When Han Juntian heard Lin Fan's words, his entire face was dumbstruck, as though he had just seen a ghost. You were the one who caused everything? Han Juntian asked. Lin Fan's eyes fluttered over as he declared loudly, I didn't cause that. That was something that came from the bottom of their hearts. That toy was something that I created, one that could display the innermost desires in one's heart. That old trash Qi Tian and Tai Qianshan must have always been FC-king around like that in the past. Therefore, when faced with the toy, they did not even care if there were any spectators as they continued that affair which degrades our moral culture. This Kunlun God Sect is really one hell of a promiscuous place. Hearing the words that Lin Fan had just said, Han Juntian expressed his deepest doubts. If he were to take them at face value and believe in him, he would really be one hell of a fool. However, all of the powerful beings who were spectating nearby were truly starting to believe it just that slight bit in their hearts. Could the upper echelons of the Kunlun God Sect truly be this promiscuous? Lin Fan spoke up once more, I am only a mere saint immortal state being. How could I have such capabilities? This means that old trash Qi Tian and Tai Qianshan must have always been engaging in such acts from the start. Highs, if I didn't test them out, I might not have believed in how dark and promiscuous this sect was. Shut up, Zheng Yangtian, is this the attitude that your heaven and earth sect wishes to portray toward mine? A thunderous voice boomed out of the Kunlun God Sect as a formidable consciousness burst forth. This trace of consciousness was boundless. Shooting right out of the depths of the Kunlun god sect, it eventually materialized into a physical body and stood tall in the void. White robes that blanketed the entire sky spread out as that figure appeared before the masses. What a formidable aura! When Lin Fan caught sight of that person, his entire heart leapt with joy. What an incredible existence! He was even stronger than that old master Qi Tian from before. White Saint, that's the senior old master of the Kunlun god sect who has the highest hopes of turning into a heavenly lord. To think that this would actually alarm him. Hue, given the current situation, how could he still not come out? The face of the entire sect is almost thrown away completely by now. Do you think that he can still sit by idly? Pishu, yet another few figures appeared behind White Saint's back. There were more than 10 senior old masters that had appeared. This was the entire depth of Kunlun god sect's resources. The moment those senior old masters appeared, the entire void seemed as though it was about to stick together. With so many powerful beings standing together, the might exuded out was so great that even the heavens could barely endure this mounting pressure. Han Juntian and Lin Fan stumbled back a few steps. Right now, this situation was no small matter. This wasn't something that most people could possibly handle. With more than 10 immortal kings standing there, the type of circumstances right now were beyond most people's ability to handle. White Saint, we had never stepped in right from the very beginning. It has always been the effort of this junior here. However, your Kunlun god sect right now is truly way too disappointing. To think that an old master of yours could not even take down a single Grand Master candidate of my sect. Not only that, even your Grand Master has been subdued. If word of this were to get out, I'm afraid you guys will just have everyone laughing with their jaws wide open. At this moment, a senior old master of the Heaven and Earth sect appeared. Zheng Yangtian. He was a senior old master of the Heaven and Earth sect whose cultivation state was tantamount to the Heaven and Earth, possessing an unrivaled might. He was a powerful being from the same time period as White Saint. Greetings to the old master. Han Juntian bowed over to Zheng Yangtian gently. Greetings to the old master. Right now, Lin Fan had to depend on the old master to protect their lives. Therefore, he was naturally polite and well behaved. Zheng Yangtian took a look at Lin Fan before nodding his head. Very well done. You've raised the morale of our sect. Lin Fan sniggered out, thank you for the praise, old master. It's only something I should do. Meanwhile, all the other senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect had arrived as well. Initially, they were all cultivating in seclusion. But none of them would have expected that the events of today would have caused such a huge ruckus. Right now, the atmosphere of the scene was a little suffocating. Immortal kings against immortal kings. This level of might was something extremely rare to come across even in the endless mainland. All of the surrounding spectators were beyond excited right now. When would they ever get a chance to witness such a majestic sight? And to think that even the immortal kings of the legends would be all appearing right now. This was just absolutely striking. White Saint cast a single glance over at Lin Fan, then looked at Zheng Yangtian, release them. Zheng Yangtian smiled out, I can't decide on that matter. I've got to ask this disciple then. Are you willing to release them? Lin Fan looked at his senior old master, then over at White Saint. The cultivation state of this White Saint was a little high now, pretty formidable indeed. He was truly not someone whom most people could afford to offend. Yet, Lin Fan took a step forward and looked over at White Saint with a proud manner, release your mother, I will. Your daddy has captured them based on my own capabilities. Why should I let them go just because you demand for it? What sort of a little pea are you to demand that? With the old master as his backing right now, what did Lin Fan have to be afraid of? Those words of Lin Fan that came out had everyone's jaws dropping to the ground. Was this lad looking to die? That person before him was White Saint, the powerful immortal king who had the highest chance of leveling up into a heavenly lord in the entire endless mainland. But, to think that this lad here would actually dare to rail out at even him. Was he not afraid of not being able to step out of his sect ever again? If he were to ruffle the feathers of a powerful being as such, he would most likely be killed in a split second no matter where he went, unless he were to cower in his sect forever. Zheng Yangtian shook his head, you must mind your tone when speaking with Senior White Saint. Oh, got it. Lin Fan nodded his head and changed his attitude, Senior White Saint, I'm truly sorry for that just now. I can't release them because you're not big enough for me to do so. Right now, White Saint was truly incensed thoroughly by Lin Fan. This lad was truly just looking to die. Good, very good. Instead of getting angry, White Saint burst out in laughter. He then looked over at Zheng Yangtian, very good. The fact that the Heaven and Earth sect is able to have a disciple as such is truly your good fortune. It must be because I, White Saint, have been in seclusion for such a long time that there's hardly anyone who remembers my capabilities anymore. Since everyone is present right now, you guys don't have to leave then. Let me practice my hands for a bit. Piok, I heard that you're a senior old master of the Kunlun God sect, but you don't look like anything much either. Just at that moment, everyone was completely stumped by a single sound they heard. When they cast their sight over, they realized that that lad had suddenly taken out old Master Chi Tien out of nowhere. He then took a ridiculous-looking brick in his hand, and slapped onto the face of old Master Chi Tien with violence. At the same time, his other hand was hurling out punches onto the latter's face. That blood-bursting fist of the North Star erupted forth immediately, causing old Master Chi Tien's entire face to be swollen and bruised. It was absolutely horrifying to look at. A senior old master of the Kunlun God sect being held in the hands of someone and humiliated left and right was truly a frightening sight to behold. Looking at everything before him, White Saint's heart burned with a raging blaze. He could not believe that the Heaven and Earth sect would dare to treat a senior old master from the Kunlun God sect as such. Zheng Yangtian stood out. White Saint, if you wish to fight it out, the Heaven and Earth sect shall play with you to the end. But, you had better consider the consequences properly. Ha 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 ha, White Saint roared out in laughter before his eyes flashed with a deranged look. Zheng Yangtian. I suppose you must have forgotten about my other title apart from White Saint, E.H. Do you really think that I will be fearful of the consequences? You. Zheng Yangtian knitted his brows. He had suddenly remembered that back when White Saint had entered the immortal king state, he was already an extremely maniacal character, one who would never ever bother about any consequences. You're starting to fear now instead, E.H. White Saint spoke up before the other could say anything. Lin Fan looked over at Zheng Yangtian and suddenly realized that the old master was truly looking somewhat fearful. It was as though he was considering the implications of this. Lin Fan could not help but sigh out in his heart. The old senior master truly wasn't tough enough. If he had the immortal king cultivation state, what would Lin Fan have to be afraid of? White Saint old dog, don't you get overly brazen now. How dare you force my sect's senior old master? Do you really think that our Heaven and Earth sect is fearful? I'll give you a huge present now. Receive it well. Right at that moment, Lin Fan carried out Tai Qianshan as well. Without saying anything more, a dagger appeared in his hand. 3 times in, 3 times out, it was settled cleanly and perfectly. You dare, White Saint roared out. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. Too late, too sad. If you want to fight, come and fight. It's not as though the Heaven and Earth sect could be afraid of you. Old masters, let's not waste our breath on them anymore. There is no room for cowards in the Heaven and Earth sect. Does this White Saint old dog really think that we're afraid of him? Let us mow them over today and whack them till they start to doubt life itself. Do you guys agree? Zheng Yangtian, Han Juntian, everyone was left completely dumbfounded. This was a bloody warmonger right here. And also, agree your mother. But right now, there was probably no way back anymore. This lad had just stabbed the Grand Master of the Kunlun God sect to death. They would most likely have to account for this today no matter what. Chapter 1084 I'll leave this fella over to you guys. Chapter 1084, I'll leave this fella over to you guys. Madness. This was truly madness. All of the powerful beings spectating no longer knew what they should say. How in the world did the Heaven and Earth sect produce such a disciple? This guy was just trying to create trouble through and through. And right now, they had finally understood as well, that lad truly did have a solid foundation. Otherwise, there was no way he could have subdued old Master Chi Tien. And to their horror, that lad had even gone ahead and stabbed Tai Qianshan to death. This was just bloody heaven revolting. Han Juntian looked over at Lin Fan, truly not knowing what to say anymore. This lad was too good at causing trouble. Not only that, wasn't he way too fast at striking out as well? He had gone ahead and stabbed Tai Qianshan to death without saying anything at all. This was just trying to go at it with the Kunlun God sect till the bitter end. Old masters, what are you guys still hesitating for? The path of cultivation was meant to be one where one could do anything they wished for anyway. If we're indignant, we FCK them over. They have one less senior old master now as well, so it's not as though we can be afraid of them, can we? Lin Fan pushed. Right now, he was truly getting hurried. If they still did not go for such a perfect opportunity, they would really be taking in a huge loss then. Zheng Yangtian was truly undecided right now. This was a huge matter here. Who in the world would just fight because they felt like it? At the same time, he could not help but feel a cold chill in his heart. Thankfully, they had noticed this early on. If they had allowed this lad to be the Grand Master, wouldn't the Heaven and Earth sect turn into a war bulldozer? But in all honesty, he did take quite the liking to this lad's personality. Only a tough personality as such could bring the sect forward to greater heights. But of course, a personality as such had two sides to it. One would either become an extremely godly being, or they would die an extremely ghastly death. White Saint's rage had attacked his heart entirely by now. Very good, huh? Killing my Kunlun God sect's Grand Master. No matter what, you guys will definitely have to account for this today. Oi, White Saint old trash. At this moment, Lin Fan raised his head and shouted out. White Saint turned his face over with a grim, dark expression, lad. Today. Before waiting for him to finish, Lin Fan cut into his words, White Saint old trash, don't speak now. The moment you opened your mouth, I already knew what you were going to say. Either you're going to have me dead thoroughly, or no one in the entire 9 heavens and 10 earths would be able to come and save me, or some sh*t like that. But, let me just ensure you that the Kunlun God sect will definitely have to kneel before us today. Also, if you want to fight, come and fight. What's up with all the trash talk? There are too many people in this world who have died because they had too much trash to talk about. But of course, Tai Qianshan may not have mattered that much to you. What about this old trash here? How do you feel right now? At this moment, Lin Fan lifted old Master Qi Tian. Right now, the latter was looking wretched than ever. There was no way he still had any bit of air signifying his status as a senior old master of a major sect. How about now? Lin Fan lifted old Master Qi Tian in his arm and pointed over at White Saint while asking. When Han Juntian caught sight of everything before him, his heart skipped a beat. Lin Fan, slow down now. Don't get too worked up. However, Lin Fan chuckled in response, don't worry, Grand Master. I've never been worked up from the start. When the senior old masters caught sight of the scene before them right now, their mental states flared up. This lad here was just downright humiliating their Kunlun God sect. White Saint barked out, if you dare to do anything to him, your death shall be. Splurt. Before White Saint was even done with his words, Lin Fan's hand was lifted and dropped with a blade, sending that mysterious dagger digging right into the body of old Master Qi Tian. A hole was cleanly dug with it, causing his fresh blood to gush out in a rush. N-O-V-L-P in .c ohm. After being knocked unconscious by the 9-5 legendary brick, old Master Qi Tian's powers had all sunk under, and there was completely no way for them to protect his body. Otherwise, given old Master Qi Tian's strength, it was truly a huge question as to whether that dagger could have penetrated in the first place. Holy FCK, that lad has really gone and stabbed it in. Everyone, we better hurry and get further away from this place. This is definitely an inevitable battle right here. Who knows if we might be implicated in it? Horrifying. This is simply way too horrifying. Is that lad truly not afraid of death or what? Everyone was mortified in their hearts, carrying faces full of disbelief. In their eyes, everything happening here right now was just way too horrifying. Back when Tai Qianshan was stabbed to death, they were already appalled by it. But now that this guy had stabbed old Master Qi Tian directly as well, what else could they say? Lin Fan lifted up old Master Qi Tian before rolling his eyes at White Saint, come repeat that again. Right now, all of White Saint's blood was literally rushing right into his head with rage, causing an endless fury to surge through him. He wanted to so damned bloody badly kill this lad mercilessly. You dare! A maddened howl pierced the skies, causing a boundless might to explode forth from him, causing the heavens to tremble. Some of the surrounding spectators with a lower cultivation state were rattled so badly that their blood was boiling furiously within them, turning them frightfully pale. Not only was White Saint a senior old master of the Kunlun God sect, he was also the #1 powerful being in the entire Kunlun God sect. And yet, he was angered to the brink of insanity by Lin Fan right now. He had never come across a person as such, and neither had he imagined that someone like this could exist in the entire world. This was clearly an ant, yet he dared to challenge his authority. However, Lin Fan was a character who feared neither the heavens nor the earth. No matter how incredible one was, if he was indignant, he'd just FCK things up. It was either his death or the other party's demise, as there was no scope for compromise. If one were to swallow things in and hold back their arrogance just because the other party was strong, what sort of meaning was there to a life like that? Besides, it was not as though a situation where he won as the weaker side had never occurred before. Splurt. Just as White Saint had said out those two words, You dare? Lin Fan stabbed the belly of old Master Qi Tian once more. This character of his that stabbed out right away just because he was displeased was something that had White Saint truly enraged by now. While Zheng Yangtian and some of the senior old masters were not saying anything right now, they had started conversing telepathically with their consciousnesses. They were just allocating the job scope, who would fight with whom, and how they should cooperate with one another later on. A battle between immortal kings was not one to be underestimated. They had to allocate their roles properly first. Han Juntian, who was in a daze the entire time, suddenly received a telepathic message from the old masters. They told him to retreat and avoid staying in front. He had just leveled up to the immortal king state, and was severely injured as well. If he got embroiled in this battle, he might not be able to be of much help. Han Juntian reminded Lin Fan to watch out for his own safety before retreating out of the battlefield slightly. Lin Fan stood there silently. While he was feeling a slight tinge of nervousness in his heart, it was mostly excitement. If he were able to stab this old Master Qi Tian to death, this cultivation state of his was definitely bound to level up. Above Saint Immortals were immortal lords. He had already stabbed an immortal lord to death. If he were to stab this immortal king to death as well, the experience points would definitely be enough. Lin Fan hollered out toward White Saint, "Come on. Say something more again. I, Lin Fan, am going to set my words clear today. Do you think that I wouldn't be able to do anything to you just because you lay down some threats? If you want to fight, fight then. Who's afraid of whom? Today, this old Master Qi Tian here is dead meat for sure." Old Master White Saint shut his mouth up right now. His heart was more flustered than anyone else's at this moment. They must definitely rescue old Master Qi Tian. That was a powerful being of immortal king state. How much resources must the Kunlun God sect expend in order to groom a single immortal king? How much time must they spend? This was not something that could be done just by accumulating pills for one to consume. Not saying anything, Lin Fan's brows furrowed. He then sniggered out, "Even if you say nothing, your daddy is still gonna stab him." Splurt. And just like that, 3 stabs were completed, and the world turned wonderful for Lin Fan at that moment. Ding. Congratulations on killing immortal king state being. Ding. Experience points plus. Ding. Cultivation state leveled up. Cultivation state. Immortal lord. ... At that moment, Lin Fan's entire aura started going berserk. Haha, White Saint. Say, has your entire Kunlun God sect gone stupid or what? Also, are you guys still fighting or not? Lin Fan roared out. UF*CKING bastard. At this moment, White Saint was truly incensed. He instantly sent a palm strike hurling out toward Lin Fan. When Lin Fan caught sight of that, he retreated straight away. Old masters, it's your turn now. I'll leave this fella over to you guys. Lin Fan shouted out. Chapter 1085 Bumping into a Ghost. Chapter 1085. Bumping into a Ghost. Zheng Yangtian and all the others were absolutely stunned. This lad was way too despicable, wasn't he? But at this moment, none of them had the luxury to think that much. This was a battle that they could not avoid anymore. Escaping was not going to be an option either. Although, it was not like they had nothing to gain out of this either. They had already calculated this through. Now that the Kunlun God sect was short of a senior old master, they were going to fight with a huge loss on their side. There was no reason why the Heaven and Earth sect was going to take on a huge loss in this battle. A fight between immortal kings was not something that could be decided in a single instant. As to what the eventual outcome would be like, that much was obvious. The battle would naturally come to an end eventually, with the Kunlun God sect's fighting strength taking a major dip in the future. This was a battle that Heaven and Earth sect would profit from for sure. The fact that Han Juntian had leveled up into the immortal king state was already an extremely wonderful affair for the Heaven and Earth sect. This was not even including this lad of theirs that had been producing an exceptionally stellar performance this entire time. Naturally, White Saint's wish right now was to have Lin Fan killed. However, Zheng Yangtian blocked him in his way firmly. "Do you really wish to have things get to this point?" White Saint howled out. Zheng Yangtian was equally helpless right now. But at this moment, a fiery battle intent surged from the depths of his heart. "If you want to fight, fight. What's with all the nonsense you're spouting?" Boom. The entire world was suddenly filled with nothing but sounds of explosion. All the spectating beings retreated one after another. None of them wanted to be collateral damage. Right now, things were really beyond the point of madness. It was so mad that it left everyone frightened. A battle between the highest echelons of 2 major sects was not something normal they could have themselves dragged into at all. If any one of them were implicated, they would have no one to complain to even if they were to die. Looking at everything before him, Lin Fan's heart skipped with joy. At the same time, he started analyzing as well. The current situation was extremely chaotic. Given his strength, there was no way he could possibly be of much help. However, that Lin brand's soap that he had still possessed an incredible effect no matter what. Even though there were only 2 charges left, he would definitely be able to FCK over some senior old masters still. Although, there was really no hurry. Firstly, he had to earn a big lump sum out of all of this. He would just let the senior old masters from both sides duke it out with their guts for a round first while he reaped in the benefits like a fisherman. At this moment, Lin Fan cast his sight toward the headquarters of the Kunlun God sect. There must naturally be no more powerful beings there right now. Given his current cultivation state as an immortal lord, he would definitely be able to barge his way in with force. Pishu. Without thinking more, Lin Fan dove right into the void and rushed toward the Kunlun God sect. White Saint was naturally the first one to spot Lin Fan's shadow. He had been keeping an eye out for that fella the entire time. Now that he noticed that lad rushing for the Kunlun God sect, his heart was naturally getting anxious. White Saint, your opponent is me. Don't get careless now. Zheng Yangtian chopped down with his palm, causing the void around them to explode. A battle between him and White Saint was one that was hard to have the dominant side determined. As for who would stand victorious if they were to continue fighting as such, no one could be the wiser. But, one thing was for sure, victory could definitely not be determined without an extended period of time. Powerful beings of the immortal king state all had extremely profound foundations. There was no way of determining who was stronger than the other directly. And of course, Zheng Yangtian had also noticed that lad out toward the Kunlun God sect. His heart chuckled out. Seemed like it was going to be a round of bad luck for the headquarters of the Kunlun God sect now. Even though that lad's cultivation was not at the immortal king state, given his strength right now, all the remaining fellas in the Kunlun God sect would naturally not be a match for him. As for the other immortal lord state beings, who knew, they might probably all have to take a huge loss in the hands of this disciple as well. At this moment, all disciples of the Kunlun God sect felt as though they had just seen a ghost. N-O-V-E in .c Om. That fella is coming out for us. Hurry and retreat. We are not his match. Save us. Who can come and save us, please? The scene earlier on was something that all of these disciples had witnessed personally. This person was way too savage and inhumane. Their Grand Master had died in his hands. Heck, even old Master Qi Tian had died in his hands. Bam! Lin Fan soared down from the void and landed right in the Kunlun God sect. When the surrounding disciples caught sight of this brute, they yelped out and retreated instantly. At this moment, those immortal weapons behind Lin Fan were not used up just yet, floating behind him dense and clustered. Ordinary people would definitely be scared silly just by the sight of that. This fellow was simply not a human. Looking at everything before him, Lin Fan's lips curled into a smile. This was the Kunlun God sect. Now that all of their senior old masters were out fighting with the old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect, there was definitely no powerful being who could stand in his way. As long as the Kunlun God sect does not die, I'm going to fight it out with you. At this moment, a single disciple crowd burst out of them to attack Lin Fan. Lin Fan took a single glance at him, unbothered at all as he sent a slap flying over. You look decent, so I'm not going to kill you. For a disciple to still be able to come forth at a moment as such was something that Lin Fan could not help but feel impressed with. Therefore, he naturally had mercy in his strike and did not kill the other party. Furthermore, it was not as though he was some mass massacring maniac. Only the truly powerful beings were his targets. As for the rest of the shrimps, he might as well forget it. They should be allowed to have a good chance to grow. Who knew, perhaps one of them might just turn out to become a powerful being somewhere. Where is the treasure ground of the Kunlun God sect? One of you come and tell me. Lin Fan looked at the surrounding disciples and asked. However, all of them kept their guards up while staring back at him. How could they possibly let him know of the most important place in their sect? Therefore, all of them kept their lips sealed. Heaven and Earth sect, you guys are really overboard with your bullying. At this moment, a long streak of light bolted down from the void. When the disciples of the Kunlun God sect caught sight of who it was, they exclaimed in joy, Vice Grand Master Xing Tian. Lin Fan focused his gaze over as his lips curled into a grin. Decent cultivation state there, immortal lord state. However, he was far weaker compared to Tai Qianshan. Oi, don't you get things mixed up now. Our Heaven and Earth sect will never ever bully others. It was a fair fight, get it? But, I suppose it's time for you to let me know where the treasure chamber of the Kunlun God sect lies, eh? Lin Fan asked. Dream on, Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian roared out. He was equally infuriated as everyone else here. To think that the Heaven and Earth sect would be this audacious and really declare war against the Kunlun God sect. Furthermore, the status of the battle outside was extremely intense right now, and the Kunlun God sect wasn't even at an advantage. Highs, truly uncooperative. Lin Fan shook his head helplessly. These fellas were truly way too uncooperative with his line of work. He did not even have the intention of taking their lives, yet none of them knew what was good for them. I-oh. Right then, Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian struck out instantly in front of Lin Fan. Hurling out a single fist, he shattered the air in front of him. Die! All of the surrounding disciples of the Kunlun God sect yelled out excitedly. Fight on, Vice Grandmaster. Let this fella know of the power of our Kunlun God sect. That's right, you must definitely seek revenge for our Grandmaster. Grandmaster died such a terrible death. He was a really good man, and yet, he was slain by this person so mercilessly. The eyes of Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian shone with an infinite gleam. He definitely had to bring out his fullest strength to try and get revenge for the Grandmaster. Looking at the fist that was expanding continuously in his pupils, Lin Fan's lips curled into a smile. True Origin's crushing kick. This was move that he had not deployed for a long time now, so much so that he had almost forgotten about it. But, given the situation right now, there was no way he wouldn't use it. The other party had split his feet wide open, revealing that preciously vulnerable place of his. This was just forcing Lin Fan to use this ultimate move of his. Bam! Right at that moment, a clean, crushing sound rang out. The entire Kunlun God sect fell silent. All of those once cheering disciples went silent as well as they looked over at Lin Fan in stupefaction. It was truly as though they had bumped into a ghost right now. Chapter 1086 Swept Clean. Chapter 1086, Swept Clean. Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian naturally bore a killing intent toward Lin Fan. Every single strike he launched brought his fullest strength with it. With punches of this level, even average immortal lords might not be able to hold out. But all of a sudden, that serious expression on the face of Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian took a stark change. His face contorted into a grimace as those initially small, beady eyes of his were bolted wide open. His body quivered, his legs wobbled. Taking a quick peek, Lin Fan retracted his foot slowly. Looking over at the face of Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian, his lips curled into a grin once more. Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian opened his mouth. However, he had only spoken a single word when he felt as if his throat was being choked, such that he did not know what else he could say anymore. Hush, don't speak now and slowly savor this feeling. Otherwise, it's only going to hurt more. Lin Fan consoled him. To this day, there was no one who could remain standing after receiving this godly kick of his. The strong suit of this kick was that it was swift, accurate, and vicious. Straight away, it could cause one to lose all descendants, something that was absolutely horrifying. The surrounding disciples were completely stumped. What did he just do to the Vice Grandmaster? I've got no idea. Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian, what's wrong with you? No, Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian, you definitely have to slay him. Boo-hoo, this fella is really way too terrifying. I'm so scared right now. The face of Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian flashed with shades of white and red as both his feet wobbled out furiously. His expression was distorting rapidly as he struggled to look at Lin Fan with difficulty. Eventually, he spat out two words. So despicable. Instantly, a tragic shriek rang out as Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian collapsed onto the ground on his knees, with both hands clutching his groin area. Perhaps, clutching his groin was the only way to lessen the pain that was throbbing violently at this moment. Painful. This was truly way too painful. Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian could not believe this sensation he was experiencing right now. He was a powerful being of the immortal Lord state. How could his physical body be this fragile? However, the pain was something that was absolutely real. Even as he churned out his powers continuously, he had no way of fighting against that pain at all. As he lowered his head, beads of sweat dripped down onto the ground in pitter-patters. He clenched down on his teeth tightly to stop himself from crying out once more. He was a Vice Grandmaster of the Kunlun God sect. How could he be expressing such a pitiable state right now? Lin Fan looked over at him and could tell that he was having one hell of a time enduring everything inside. So, he reminded kindly, don't hold it in anymore. Screaming it all out would have you feeling much better. Otherwise, it's really going to hurt more. The head of Vice Grandmaster Xing Tian bolted right up and glared at Lin Fan in hatred. Finally, he could bear it and no longer as he howled. A tragic howl shook the entire heaven and earth. This could only be described as abnormally horrifying. The emotions contained within that tragic howl were so intense that one could cry just by listening to it. Just how much pain was his physical body holding in right now? Clutching at his groin, Vice Grand Master Xing Tian collapsed onto the ground and rolled left and right. For an immortal lord, a Vice Grand Master of the Kunlun God sect at that, to be in such a state without dignity, it was truly sad. His entire lifetime of mighty achievements had been desecrated at this moment. Lin Fan raised his head and looked over at the surrounding disciples. When the latter caught sight of Lin Fan's gaze, they all yelped out and stumbled back. Right now, Lin Fan was nothing but an absolutely terrifying existence in their hearts. They had not expected that even the Vice Grand Master would not be a match for him. Furthermore, for the Vice Grand Master to even drop with just a single move, what kind of a concept was that? That tragic howl had even White Saint alarmed. Right now, his heart was flustered beyond anything else. After all, the sect had been invaded by that lad. Furthermore, the howl from earlier on should have been from Vice Grand Master Xing Tian. White Saint did not know what exactly had happened for a miserable howl as such to arise. Damn it, White Saint truly wanted to head back to the sect right now and have that lad killed entirely. However, he was being held up by Zheng Yangtian, and couldn't afford to get distracted in even the slightest bit. In a battle between supremely powerful beings, victory could often be decided through a mere slip-up by either side. This was especially the case for two supremely powerful immortal king-state beings. They naturally could not afford even a moment of distraction. No matter how hurried he was right now, White Saint had no choice. At this moment, Lin Fan looked over at Vice Grand Master Xing Tian before him and revealed a smile. Hurry up and tell me. Where is the treasure chamber? Right now, the only thought on Lin Fan's mind was to swipe the entire resources of the Kunlun God sect empty. As one of the 9 sects, how rich was the Kunlun God sect? This was something that Lin Fan could not even begin to imagine. As long as he were to wipe them clean, the Kunlun God sect would definitely become the poorest out of the 9 sects. At that time, oh ho, good FC King luck to them. Without being able to give the disciples any resources to cultivate with, they would definitely not feel comfortable in their hearts. In order for a brighter future, they would go and seek out other paths without a doubt. But to Lin Fan's exasperation, he seemed to have kicked out a little too heavily with that strike earlier on. This fella hadn't recovered even by now. What a Mother Sea King dog's tea this was. The location of a sect's treasure chamber might truly not be made known to most ordinary disciples. Perhaps, only those of the upper echelons could know about that. Stop screaming and tell me. Hurry up. Lin Fan grabbed the hands of Vice Grand Master Xing Tian. But for the latter, his hands being forced away from his crotch had only served to intensify the pain that was throbbing rapidly. Struggling and fighting with his life, he tried to clutch his groin back with all his might. Seeing a situation as such, Lin Fan truly did not know what to say any longer. Eventually, he could only sigh out and look at that Vice Grand Master Xing Tian with a deep look of exasperation. What sh*t could he still ask right now? Given the state of this guy, he could barely even live properly at the moment. How could he have any way of answering his question? Had he known that this would be the case, Lin Fan would have gone easier with his strike. But, when he caught sight of the surrounding disciples, he could not help but have a thought. Even though he was no mass-murdering maniac, his mentality was still a little craftier than normal. Without saying anything more, Lin Fan lifted up this Vice Grand Master and had him tossed into the heaven and earth smelt. When he caught sight of those disciples, he even gave out a series of sinister giggles. What's he trying to do? November LBJNN. What a sinister laughter. Just what is he thinking of doing to us? So horrifying. I want to hurry and get out of this place right now. He's coming over. Hurry and run. Quick. Right then, Lin Fan made his move. His voice was just like a tempting devil as he appeared in front of those disciples. Moving his hands slightly, he rounded them up and tossed them all into the heaven and earth smelt. Help! No! Lin Fan roared out in laughter. He did not leave a single one of them off as he tossed all of those disciples into the heaven and earth smelt. After a long time, Lin Fan heaved in a breath of air deeply. It was finally done. This was too darned pleasurable a feeling. At that moment, the insides of the Kunlun God sect were empty, without a single person left. All of the disciples had been swept away cleanly by Lin Fan, be it elders or vice grand masters, they were all captured by Lin Fan. With that, Lin Fan cast his sight far into the distance. The fights that were breaking out on the battlefield right now were extremely intense. Neither side was standing above the other with an advantage at all, causing Lin Fan to watch with some slight amazement and stupefaction as well. Peeking at the disciples of the Kunlun God sect inside his heaven and earth smelt, Lin Fan's lips curled into a wide grin. He then walked over to the battlefield flamboyantly. Right now, he was headed straight over for a negotiation with the Kunlun God sect. Chapter 1087 Hotpot. Chapter 1087, Hotpot. While White Saint and Zheng Yangtian were both characters of the same era, it had been many years since they had fought one another. Now that they were engaged in a battle, it did invoke a reminiscent feeling of how they had once fought years ago for a single treasure. White Saint, you've got to watch out. That disciple of my sect has already entered the Kunlun God sect. Perhaps your entire Kunlun God sect might be in a state of chaos by now. Zheng Yangtian's strikes were sharp, and he was assaulting through words as well to strike some nervousness into the other's mental state. However, in case of a powerful being at White Saint's state, how could he find his mental state rattled that easily? Naturally, he did not pay heed to the words of Zheng Yangtian. HMPH. The foundation of the Kunlun God sect is deep. Do you really think that there's no one left in my entire Kunlun God sect? Of course, White Saint had faith in those vice grand masters and the elders back in the sect. With them around, that lad might very well be suppressed if he had dared to do anything brazen. As for the battle between him and Zheng Yangtian, he would definitely not let up until there was a clear victor. When the surrounding beings caught sight of Lin Fan, they started conversing in hushed whispers. Just what in the world happened? That lad has come out of the Kunlun God sect. Could it be that the Kunlun God sect has no way of taking down that lad? I think there's a high chance he was blocked off by them. Even though the topmost powerful beings of the Kunlun God sect had already come out, there are still quite a number of powerful beings back in the sect similar to Tai Qianshan. No Velpi in C Ohm. He must be returning with disappointment then. However, the situation has already spiraled to a state that's hard to recover from by now. This battle between the immortal kings is no longer something he can manipulate or have any control over. When Han Juntian caught sight of Lin Fan, he rushed forth immediately. He did not know just what the situation was like right now. However, when he caught sight of Lin Fan, he did not know what he should say any longer. This lad was way too good at causing trouble. For everything that was happening right now, who was going to be held responsible? A battle between the senior old masters was no longer something of their level. The void was exploding, shattering into pieces. The void currents were swirling out, ripping the entire world apart. Anyone who was dragged into a battle of this level would most likely be shredded into pieces by the formidable aftershock before they could even get a chance to fight at all. What did you head over to the Kunlun God sect for? Han Juntian asked. Lin Fan chuckled, I did something big. Right now, it's time to negotiate with them, Grand Master. Now, what do you think I should ask for later on? Initially, Lin Fan had wanted to use the soap to FCK over a few of them again. But, the current situation did not seem as though he would get a chance for his soap to make a play. There were so many senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect around. Not only that, they must definitely have made some preparations against him. There was no way all of these senior old masters would let him FCK them over so easily. Without 100% confidence, Lin Fan would not just experiment for fun. This was a legendary weapon. It would be fine if it at least succeeded. But if not, he would have taken a huge loss. Right now, Lin Brand's soap was his greatest killer weapon. No matter the sort of powerful being he would come across, he could absolutely knock the other party sprawling over. Han Juntian looked over at Lin Fan, not knowing what this lad had just done. However, by the look of his face, it seemed as though it was truly something big. Because of that, his heart was extremely curious as well. Just what sort of a big thing have you done this time around? Also, what's up with this negotiation or something as well? By now, Han Juntian was truly impressed with Lin Fan. This war between the Kunlun God sect and the Heaven and Earth sect was something that was never meant to have happened in the first place. But now that things had already reached this stage, wanting to change them was probably going to be impossible. Furthermore, a fight between the old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect and Kunlun God sect was not something they had the power to stop. Lin Fan laughed out mysteriously, you'll find out in a bit. At this moment, Lin Fan raised his head into the void and yelled out, "All of you, stop it." But what pissed Lin Fan off was the fact that no one gave a single bit of sh*t about him at all. The fight between the Kunlun God sect and the Heaven and Earth sect was still going on as the void crackled out in explosions, almost being destroyed entirely by this duel. "Old master, don't fight anymore. There's no point to it any longer. Right now, it's time to negotiate." Lin Fan yelled out again. "Holy FCK, there's still no one giving a single FCK about me." At this moment, Lin Fan was truly angered as he let out the Heaven and Earth smelt. "Kunlun God sect, you had better F***king stop that right now. Or do you guys want your entire sect to be annihilated?" Lin Fan roared out. Thereafter, feeling as though he had used up quite a bit of strength, he whipped out a bunch of pills and stuffed them right into his mouth, chomping them happily. But now that his cultivation state had already been leveled to the immortal lord state, these immortal pills could hardly give him any bit of experience points. This was something that gave Lin Fan a huge headache. Uproar. When the Heaven and Earth smelt was let out, the entire scene was filled with an uproar. All the disciples of the Kunlun God sect who were stuck inside were slamming out at its sides, wanting to get out of it. And yet, there was no use to it at all. The Heaven and Earth smelt was a product of the system, not something that could be broken apart so Mother Sea King easily. When White Saint, who was locked in battle with Zheng Yangtian, caught sight of this, his entire mental state got rattled. His eyes then widened furiously as he repelled Zheng Yangtian away with his palm. How could this? When Zheng Yangtian caught sight of that smelt, he was stumped as well. Unbelievable. This was simply way too unbelievable. Was the reason why that lad had infiltrated into the Kunlun God sect just to kidnap all of their disciples? Lin Fan rested his palm on top of the Heaven and Earth smelt. "Now, fellow senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect, we can finally have a talk." White Saint spun his head around instantly and glared over at the Kunlun God sect in the distance, unable to sense a single trace of life from within. "White Saint old trash, don't bother looking anymore. All of the Kunlun God sect disciples are right here and locked by me in this smelt. If you don't wish for your Kunlun God sect to be annihilated entirely, it's best for us to have a good talk instead." Lin Fan chuckled out. "You." White Saint was so enraged that his entire chest puffed up, as though he could not withstand this blow at all. All the surrounding spectators exploded in discussion at this moment as well. Horrifying. To think that this fellow would have turned the entire Kunlun God sect into a hot pot. This is way too horrifying, isn't it? There are several dozens of thousands of disciples and the Kunlun God sect. How did he do it? Not only that, and there are all the elders and vice grand masters as well. There's no way they would just sit by idly. Could this fella have just mowed them over without any of them being able to put up a fight against him? If that's truly the case, the strength of this fella must be way too terrifying, isn't it? ... Ha ha ha. Zheng Yangtian roared out in laughter. Unimaginable. Truly unimaginable. To think that a single disciple could have created a scene as such today. Since when had the Heaven and Earth sect ever produced such an impressive feat? Suppressing the Kunlun God sect and throwing them all together like a hot pot. This is the most glorious feat of the Heaven and Earth sect's history. Zheng Yangtian was truly laughing out in excitement right now. Even though the differences between the Kunlun God sect and the Heaven and Earth sect weren't all that deep, they were somewhat set in stone by the time both sects became a part of the 9 sects. While there hadn't been any major conflicts, there had indeed been countless small ones. But, now that a single disciple of the Heaven and Earth sect disciple had managed to toss the entire Kunlun God sect into a hot pot, this was way too scary, wasn't it? Am I impressive or what? Lin Fan raised his head while asking. Impressive indeed. Zheng Yangtian wasn't the slightest bit stingy in his praises. After all, he could not deny that everything that Lin Fan had done was impressive. Acts as such, who else could have pulled them off? Lin Fan smiled out gleefully. If I were to become the Grand Master, the Heaven and Earth sect would definitely skyrocket. Do you believe that? Zheng Yangtian was stunned for a moment before chuckling out. Let's leave that matter aside first and settle the one right in front of us. At that moment, Zheng Yangtian's gaze was locked onto White Saint while his lips curled into a smile. That was one hell of a smug smile. White Saint, even though there was no clear victor between us, you can't deny that after you, there is no one in your entire Kunlun God sect that's even a match for this disciple of my sect. Do you admit defeat now? White Saint looked at everything before him. Even though he was indignant in his heart, the situation right now was truly sticky. As for Lin Fan, he was indignant as well. If he didn't become the Grand Master, who else would be the Grand Master? If he were to be the Grand Master, all the disciples would definitely be brought into an extremely spectacular and magnificent life. How wonderful would that be? Chapter 1088 Lin Fan is the final boss. Chapter 1088. Lin Fan is the final boss. White Saint was a senior old master of the Kunlun God sect, the strongest one at that. However, his heart was in misery right now. This was a feeling that should have never ever appeared in his heart, not now, not ever. But given everything before his eyes, he had no other choice than to make a decision. All of the disciples of the Kunlun God sect were locked up within that heaven and earth smelt. They were the future of the Kunlun God sect. If these disciples were to be gone, the Kunlun God sect would be entirely done for. From this day forth, they would most probably be even marked off from amongst the 9 sects. White Saint's voice was hoarse. Zheng Yangtian, just what do you want? He truly had no other way out right now. Fighting them head-on doggedly. All the senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect were gathered here. Even if he were to continue fighting out, there was absolutely no way they could determine the victor. And now that all of the Kunlun God sect's disciples were in the hands of the other party, what else could he honestly do? Zheng Yangtian's mood was joyous right now. Being in seclusion for the entire time had him feeling numb toward all secular affairs. To think that the first affair he would have to deal with after such a long time would be something this big. It was something that had his old blood pumping once more, feeling absolutely incredulous. The surprises that this disciple had brought for him were way too many. Although, at times, it was more shocking than surprising to be honest. Tell me, just what in the world do you guys want? White Saint held out with a baleful gaze. To think that he would be pushed to such an extent as a powerful being of immortal king state. This was truly something absolutely unbelievable and unimaginable. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. That single howl of his contained a sense of exasperation and anguish more than anything else. Zheng Yangtian looked over at Lin Fan. So, what do you want to do with them? Zheng Yangtian was truly at a loss right now. Now that this disciple had captured all of their disciples, well, he should probably come up with a demand as well. Treasures, pills, etc. As a senior old master of the Heaven and Earth sect, Zheng Yangtian was naturally not lacking in any of those things. For someone like him who lacked nothing, he truly did not know what he wanted from them anymore. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. This question was a little serious now. He truly had to give it a good thought. Just what did he want from them? You guys chit-chat first. Give me some time to think about it. Lin Fan waved his hand off. Zheng Yangtian glared at Lin Fan. Chit-chat his A*s. If not for the fact that the disciples of the Kunlun God sect were in his hands, White Saint would have long come for his neck. But well, given the way things were right now, what else could they do other than chit-chat? Say, White Saint, do you remember a time back in the past when we were both inner sect disciples? Back then, we came across a treasure in a secret ground and fought over it. You remember that scene? Although, it was only natural that I obtained the treasure in the end. After all, my skill was still that bit better, and my might slightly greater than yours. Zheng Yangtian started reminiscing about the past. However, White Saint seemed as though he hadn't taken anything into his head as he just glared at Lin Fan fixatedly with a death stare. At this moment, Zheng Yangtian started rambling on non-stop as though he had found himself swimming in the nostalgia of the yesteryears. After thinking for a moment, Lin Fan slapped out at his thighs in Eureka and coughed out gently, all of you senior old masters, hurry and hand me all the treasures you guys have with you. The moment those words came out, the entire scene fell into a state of absolute horror. That lad is so darned bloody greedy. Treasures of the senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect. What sort of treasures would those be? And to think that he would come demanding for everything they had with them. That's too much. I wonder if the senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect would agree to it. If they don't agree to it, what else can they do? The other party has their weakness in his hands, unless they truly want the Kunlun God sect to disappear and be annihilated forever. This has truly been an eye-opener. From this day forth, there should be no one in the entire endless mainland who would dare to mess with this person anymore. Who in the bloody world would be sick enough to mess with him? He's one hell of a twisted FCK. Zheng Yangtian threw Lin Fan a gaze. The message he was trying to convey was clear. This demand was a little overboard, wasn't it? All the treasures of powerful beings of immortal king state. That was an astronomical fortune. This was especially the case for White Saint. After being an immortal king for such a long time, the wealth he carried with him must definitely be as vast as an ocean. What are you trying to do? Don't come railing at me now. If I were to get careless and have all of the disciples of the Kunlun God sect in this smelt killed, you had better not come and blame me. Looking at how White Saint was about to rail out at him, Lin Fan spoke up immediately. Indeed, White Saint was truly about to shout out at Lin Fan. However, he dug that impulse deep into his heart. Bear with it, I absolutely have to bear with it. The legacy of the Kunlun God sect must be passed down. If it were to end in his hands, he might not be able to forgive himself for his entire life. Perhaps, he might never be able to attain the great Tao of Heavenly Lord in this lifetime of his by then. White Saint looked over at Lin Fan, then at the disciples within the heaven and earth smelt. The tradition of the Kunlun God sect must not break. Must not break. Must not end. Heaven and earth sect, you guys mustn't go overboard. White Saint finally spoke up. Lin Fan's brows knitted. Overboard? I don't think this is overboard in the slightest bit. Remember this now, your Kunlun God sect was the one that had been trying to kill me from the very beginning. It was just that your strength was way too pathetic, and were unable to kill your daddy. And now that karma has arrived, you guys will just have to deal with it. When White Saint heard those words, he did not even know how he should feel about it. He was first and foremost extremely disappointed with Tai Qianshan. To think that he would even fail at killing a nameless little disciple. How could he carry the name of the Kunlun God sect's Grand Master like that? And to think that this disciple had even come knocking right on their doorsteps. This was truly the biggest humiliation that the Kunlun God sect had faced in its entire history. White Saint, I'm already giving you guys a path left to walk. I'm not even demanding for all the items in your Kunlun God sect's treasure chamber. All I'm asking for are the items that you senior old masters are carrying with you right now. Lin Fan said. White Saint lowered his head and agreed to it eventually. All right, I'll give it to you. PHWOOOOOOOM. As he swept out his sleeves, a stream of treasures flew out from White Saint's person. These were all the belongings of an immortal king, and could be described as nothing less than a vast ocean. Just these treasures alone were more than enough for one to create a middle-sized sect. And, if one were to make use of them appropriately, it could even propel them to the immortal king state. This was how profound the resources of an immortal king were. When all the powerful beings who were spectating up in the void caught sight of the treasures, their hearts were filled completely with greed. But given the current situation, all of them held it back in. They had better forget about it. With so many senior old masters who were immortal king state beings, the only people who would dare to try making a move on those treasures would be those who were tired of living. When Lin Fan caught sight of everything, his heart skipped with joy. Immortal pills, weapon crafting legendary materials, immortal herbs, there were all sorts of treasures here. This was just absolutely blinding. Pointing out with his finger, Lin Fan sent all of those treasures into his storage. Good, very good. Now, all the other remaining senior old masters. Hand over your treasures now. Lin Fan chuckled out. This feeling was truly way too amazing. Actually, Lin Fan's plan at the start was to have a couple of immortal king old masters killed so that he could raise his cultivation state rapidly. But, the way things had panned out was beyond his expectations. Even though the Lin brand's soak was extremely tyrannical, he only had 2 more chances left with it. If he were to use it right now, it might not give him the desired outcome he wanted. In fact, he might even be cockblocked by some of those people. By then, that would be a real tragedy. Therefore, Lin Fan decided to scrap the idea completely and not give it a try at all. Being able to kill old Master Qi Tian and Tai Qianshan was already one hell of a profit for him. There were definitely going to be more chances for him to kill off enemies in the future. Losing this one day would not mean much. Now that White Saint had already taken out all his treasures, what could the other senior old masters do? Naturally, they handed out all of their treasures as well. But right now, Lin Fan was just looking at them in disdain. These guys were way too poor, weren't they? Compared to White Saint, it didn't even seem as though they were of the same cultivation state. Oi, you guys are not hiding anything, are you? How can it be this little? Lin Fan asked. But when he found out that this was truly all there was to it, he could only shake his head helplessly. This was truly such a pity. Lin Fan asked softly, Old Master, do you think I should really let all of them off now? Do you think I should keep a few important figures with me? Zheng Yangtian shook his head, no need. Let them all go. We of the Heaven and Earth sect must be men of our words and never deceive others. All right then. Lin Fan opened up the lid of the Heaven and Earth smelt and released all of the Kunlun God sect's disciples. All right, listen up now, Kunlun God sect. This time around, this should serve as a lesson for you guys. If you dare to do this again next time, things will not be this simple anymore. Lin Fan declared loudly. Even though the disciples of the Kunlun God sect were feeling extremely vengeful in their hearts right now, none of them dared to act brazenly. In the heaven and earth smelt, they too had witnessed how their old masters had handed over all of their treasures. They were redeeming the hostages with their entire fortunes. This was something that touched them to the bottom of their hearts. They truly did not choose the wrong sect at all. Even though they were bullied right now, they firmly believed that they would be able to get their dignity back one day. They were determined to cultivate tirelessly and fight for the sect's glory in order to take down that huge devil of the heaven and earth sect, Lin Fan. Chapter 1089 Seclusion. Chapter 1089, Seclusion. Because of this affair, Lin Fan had turned into the greatest devil in the hearts of every single being in the Kunlun God sect, from the top to the bottom. From this day, all the disciples of the Kunlun God sect were fervent with motivation. Other than cultivation, the only thing they wanted to do was more cultivation. That was because there was only a single wish in all of their hearts, have Lin Fan of the heaven and earth sect trampled beneath their feet ruthlessly. In fact, from that moment on, the first iron rule that was implanted into new disciples recruited for the Kunlun God sect was that they must be determined to take down Lin Fan of the heaven and earth sect. Out of no reason, those innocent new disciples of the sect in the future would find themselves being ingrained with a natural enemy just like that. At this moment, the entire sky was silent while figures from both sides were floating gently in the void. White Saint no longer had any intentions, nor did he wish to carry on fighting with the heaven and earth sect anymore. He had admitted defeat, he had lost out to a single disciple, and because of the Kunlun God sect as well. If not for the fact that the legacy of the Kunlun God sect was a nagging concern in his mind, he would have fought with the heaven and earth sect all the way to the end, even if it had meant his death. After all, the dignity of an immortal king was not something to be trampled on. But right now, the reality wasn't something that he could control anymore. There were too many things that White Saint was concerned about. He could not possibly allow the Kunlun God sect to die in his hands. If he had mentioned threats such as not bothering if the entire sect was destroyed, that was because he still had quite a bit of confidence in himself. But right now, he no longer had any of the same confidence. If he hadn't admitted defeat, the sect was truly going to get annihilated. White Saint reared his head and looked into the void. It was as though his mind had gone back to a time long past. His master, the Grand Master of the sect back in his time, had patted on his head gently. White Saint, you must remember that the Kunlun God sect is your home, and you must always watch over and protect it. Even if one day you were to die, you must not let it perish. The young White Saint's eyes were glistening with a firm, resolute look as he nodded his head seriously. The Kunlun God sect admits defeat today. However, from this day forth, the Kunlun God sect and the heaven and earth sect shall never have any relationship with one another forevermore. We shall be eternal foes. White Saint looked over at Zheng Yangtian and said. Zheng Yangtian chuckled out before sweeping his robes around, let's go. Vast and mighty, the Great War had ended just like that. This was the most intense war and battle that the entire endless mainland had ever seen. With this, the world now knew of the might of the heaven and earth sect, as well as that tyrannical disposition of Lin Fan. There was most likely no other sect that would have the guts to go against the heaven and earth sect anymore. But of course, Lin Fan had gained a fierce notoriety over this single war as well. Even though he did not go through with any crazy or wild fights, the eventual outcome of everything had everyone understanding that this single disciple of the heaven and earth sect was the most horrifying existence ever. He was simply way too devious. Not only that, he was filled with methods and tricks. Most ordinary people would definitely not be able to play against him. After the heaven and earth sect left, White Saint looked at everything before him, then at the spectating audiences up in the void. Scram, N-O, vel, B, in .c, ohm. That voice was thunderous as the void crackled out and explosions burst out continuously. Even though some of the powerful beings up in the void were a little angered, none of them would dare to show White Saint any bit of attitude. After all, even if White Saint had taken a loss in the hands of the heaven and earth sect, he was still not somebody that they could afford to trifle with at all. These were troubled times for the Kunlun God sect right now. With their Grand Master slain, they were like a dragon without a head. The only way was for him to take on the reins and lead the sect for now, so that they could tide through this crisis. As for the great Tao of Heavenly Lord, that would just have to be put on hold for now. Heaven and earth sect, the figures of Lin Fan and everyone else appeared in the air. With that, all the disciples of the heaven and earth sect broke out into wild cheers as though they were welcoming the return of a hero. Senior brother was simply way too strong. It's really super worthwhile to have joined the Heaven and Earth sect. That's of course. Why don't you check out just how powerful senior brother is? Even the entire Kunlun God sect was suppressed. How proud we can be whenever we go out from this day forth. That single scene was way too stunning. How did senior brother even do that? To think that he could throw all the disciples of the Kunlun God sect into that smelt. Wow, senior brother Lin is so cool. I wonder if senior brother has a partner. Don't go fantasizing now, will you? Even if senior brother doesn't have a partner, he's not going to take a liking to you. HMPH, I'm confident in my mouth technique. Hugh, flat chest, can you sandwich it then? ... Lin Fan puffed out his chest. This day was simply way too awesome. Even though things had gone a little different from the way he had planned from the start, he still obtained a pocket full of rewards. There was no loss for him this time. After breaking through from the Saint Immortal state to the Immortal Lord state, he wasn't that far off from the Immortal King state now. Greetings to the senior old master. All the vice grand masters and elders of the sect came forward to greet him. Watching that battle had their old blood pumping through their entire bodies. It was simply way too intense. They were even wishing that they could just dive right into the fray and join in. Qing Yangxi walked up front and gave Lin Fan a big thumbs up. Good showing. Lin Fan smiled out gently in response. His heart was filled with immense pride right now. After Han Juntian returned to the sect, he entered seclusion. Right now, he was going to have to stabilize his Immortal King state. Old Master, say, now that the Grand Master has already broken through to the Immortal King state, is he going to step down? Lin Fan asked. Zheng Yangtian coughed out gently, and no hurries there. Even though Han Juntian is now an Immortal King, he still has to rule over the sect for a good 20 years. This is a long-standing tradition in our sect. Zheng Yangtian naturally knew what Lin Fan was after. But to be honest, he was still a little fearful in his heart. The battle between them and the Kunlun God sect this time around was already enough to have him shocked until his jaws dropped down. If he were to let this lad take on the role of the Grand Master right now, who knew what sort of trouble he would cause later on? It was still better to hold it off for a little first. In the past, there might still have been a comparison between Lin Fan and the other Grand Master candidates of the Heaven and Earth sect. But right now, there was nothing to compare anymore. When those Grand Master candidates caught sight of Lin Fan, they could only spout out a single word. Impressed. As for contesting for the seat of the Grand Master, they naturally did not have the capabilities to do that. At the same time, they knew that they had no more hope left either. The only chance they had was if they could climb up to a standard as high as that of Lin Fan. Without lingering around for much longer, Lin Fan headed back for his own mountain peak. After obtaining so many treasures from the senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect, he naturally had to make use of them properly. Right now, he understood well that the endless mainland was still extremely dangerous. The most important thing to do was to still try and raise his cultivation state as high as he could. Seclusion. Lin Fan took out all the items that he had obtained this time around. Countless immortal pills, countless weapon crafting legendary materials, countless immortal herbs. All of these items floated out gently all around Lin Fan. Highs, what a magnificent fortune indeed. But, it is truly a pity that popping down immortal pills is really one hell of a terrible experience. Lin Fan shook his head helplessly in shame. However, for the sake of his personal safety, it was still better for him to just bite down his teeth and go along with it. Although, before all of that, Lin Fan had to raise his physical body state first as well. Now that he was already at Immortal Lord state, he naturally had to bring his physical body state up to the Immortal Lord state as well. This plan of cultivating both his insides and outsides was something that was extremely reliable. Sitting cross-legged, he started hurling out punch after punch at himself. Bam, ding, experience points plus. Bam, ding, experience points plus. Day after day, he lost track of how long it had been. Lin Fan heaved in a deep breath of air as his eyes shone with a glint. His physical body state was finally there. Ding, physical body state has leveled up. Huff. He finally let out a sigh of relief. Right now, cultivation was a smooth sailing, in which he would not come across any troubles. While others needed to go into seclusion to comprehend the heaven and earth or make use of some pills to increase their cultivation process, Lin Fan only had to pop down pills and chop down people. If others actually knew about that sort of cultivation method, they would definitely feel envy, jealousy, and hatred. All of them would kill to have such a cultivation method as well. But, it was a pity that they'd never get the chance to do so. Looking at the pills all around him, Lin Fan made some plans in secret. If he were to leave them there, they would just be left there anyways. He might as well just swallow all of them down. If he were to die of disgust, he would just have to bow down to fate then. It was only that some of the normal immortal pills were really things that Lin Fan could not even be bothered with. They gave him no benefits at all. At that moment, Lin Fan raised his finger and pointed out, causing all lower-grade immortal pills to fly out of that bunch of pills. Looking at them, Lin Fan's eyes shone with a look of disdain. He then slapped them out into the void. Scram off, you trashy useless pills. Boom, all of those lower-grade immortal pills burst out of the place he was keeping himself in seclusion. Subsequently, then flew out of his mountain peak and floated up in the void before raining down on the sect. Chapter 1090 Pilnorexia. Chapter 1090, Pilnorexia. Even after throwing away those lower-grade immortal pills, Lin Fan did not feel the slightest bit of pain in his heart. All of those lower-grade immortal pills were literally just enough to fill his tooth gaps. Not only that, they didn't taste all that good either. After popping them, all Lin Fan had was a nauseating feeling. But things were all good right now. The only things floating out in front of Lin Fan were middle grade, upper grade, and supreme grade immortal pills. In fact, he was actually resisting an impulse to toss away all of these pills. But after deliberating further, he decided against it. All of those middle grade immortal pills could still provide some experience points, so it would be quite a pity to toss them away. He would just have to force himself a little and consume them. Heaven and Earth Sect. A disciple was walking outside, about to go exchange for some pills using his contribution points. Ever since he had entered the sect, he had worked hard with his own abilities all the way till now to finally accumulate sufficient contribution points. This was something that had him feeling particularly excited. He felt that he was still pretty useful. Pock! All of a sudden, he felt as though he was knocked on the head by something. Who was the one who sneaked an attack on me? This disciple instantly swung around and looked left and right hurriedly. But to his surprise, none of his senior or junior brothers were around him at all. Then what in the world was the thing that had struck him? As this disciple searched left and right, he suddenly caught sight of a little black ball on the ground, looking to be some sort of a pill or something. That's weird. What's this? Picking up the thing, he took a closer look at it while sniffing it with the tip of his nose. Instantly, an extremely rich fragrance pounced right into his nose as the powers within his body rumbled out furiously. Just what in the world is this? This disciple exclaimed out as though he had just bumped into a ghost. But when he caught sight of the laws of immortal Tao on the surface of that pill, he was instantly flabbergasted, trembling violently. This is an immortal pill. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Even though he had never ever consumed a single immortal pill in his life before, he had definitely seen one. The most significant mark of an immortal pill was the presence of laws of the immortal Tao around it. A single law of the immortal Tao meant that it was a lower-grade immortal pill. And right now, what he was holding in his hands was exactly that, a lower-grade immortal pill. Could it be that my, Zhang Dafei's good fortune has finally arrived? This is literally an immortal pill that dropped from the skies. Zhang Dafei was beyond excited right now as he raised his head. But when he caught sight of the situation up in the sky, he could not help but shout out. It's the attack of the immortal pills. A wild howl boomed out into the sky. All of the surrounding disciples raised their heads up in a flush. All they could see were little black spots dotting the entire sky, dropping down like raindrops. When that fragrant smell of pills spread throughout the sky, it had everyone so rattled that their jaws dropped wide open. This was absolutely unbelievable. This single commotion brought about the attention of the inner parts of the sect as well. What? Immortal pills dropping from the sky in our sect? How could that be possible? Countless people rushed outside to witness the scene. But when they raised their heads, what filled their faces was nothing but shock. Immortal pills had a spirit to them. Some of them floated out in the void and were just spiraling all around as they willed. However, they could not break through the barriers of the Heaven and Earth sect no matter what. The immortal pills are all coming from over there. A disciple shouted out while pointing at a mountain peak in the distance. That's Senior Brother Lin's mountain peak. Could this be a gift for us from Senior Brother Lin? Long live Senior Brother Lin. Senior Brother Lin is the most tyrannical. At this moment, everyone burst out into excitement. When the Vice Grand Masters and the elders of the sect caught sight of this, all of them were dumbfounded. These pills were way too horrifying, weren't they? All of them were lower-grade immortal pills. For all of these ordinary disciples, they possessed an incredible effect. Even if they were to consume them, they would not cause them to explode. However, there was one thing that they could not understand: why would he toss out so many lower-grade immortal pills? After knowing about the situation, Zheng Yangtian could only shake his head helplessly as well. Seemed like he had still underestimated the depths of this lad's resources after all. He had not asked this disciple if he had ever gone through any encounters or whatnot, that was a secret of the disciples themselves. Therefore, even though he was a senior old master of the sect, he would not mention about it. After all, a disciple like Lin Fan was the future of the sect. Right now, within the mountain peak, Lin Fan opened his mouth wide and chomped down, swallowing a whole bunch of pills with that single mouthful. In fact, he didn't even have to chew as he swallowed them whole. All the surrounding pill spirits were crying out in fear. "Don't eat us. Please let us go. We are pill spirits and we have our own consciousness. We have a life as well. Damn it, how dare you eat us? We're going to fight you with our lives." The pill spirits broke out into a huge resistance. However, in the eyes of Lin Fan, all of them were ants. There was no need to bother about any of them at all. Every single mouthful caused a huge patch of pills to disappear from the skies. This was something absolutely terrifying. Ding, experience points plus 200,000. Ding, experience points plus 50,000. Ding, experience points plus 300,000. I'll eat, even if I eat till I can't move at all, I'll have to continue eating. Lin Fan opened his mouth left and right as he stuffed all the pills inside. This time around, he was truly giving it his all. If he didn't finish all those pills, he swore that he wouldn't be considered a human any longer. Even though he felt like vomiting, he bore with it and forced that feeling back down his throat. Huff, he was fighting on with diligence. One day passed by. In the secret chamber where Lin Fan was in seclusion, there was only a single constant sound being produced, the sound of pills being popped down. 2 days passed, 3 days passed, 10 days later. No more, I really can't take it anymore. I'm going to get pilnorexia soon. Right now, Lin Fan was sweating all over with his face flushed entirely red. It was as though he had held it in for an extremely long time, and could no longer take it anymore. If he were to carry on this way, he might become the very first existence in this world who would die from an overdose of pills. But the thing was that the words he had declared meant promises that he would have to fulfill even if he had to kneel down. If he didn't finish the pills, he swore that he couldn't be considered as a human any longer. Looking at the small mountain of pills before him, Lin Fan gritted his teeth and bore with it. No matter what, he would have to finish those pills. He looked at the experience points in his system, they had truly risen up by a significant chunk. The amount of experience points required to reach the immortal king state could only be described as terrifying. Lin Fan could only bear with his own sin and forcefully finish the pills. The next day, sounds of vomiting, standing straight up, Lin Fan's entire body was wobbling right now as though he had just gone through some tremendous trauma. His hands and legs had no strength in them while his lips were entirely numb right now. He probably was having no feeling at all. He had wanted to vomit out earlier on, but he really held it back in. There wasn't a single pill left in sight right now. His face let out a deranged smile, ha ha ha. A crazed laughter came out of his mouth, him almost fainting out from laughing. I've finally done it. What sort of an existence am I, Lin Fan? Who could play with me anymore now that I've finished all of these pills? Lin Fan mumbled out to himself. Don't eat me, please don't eat me. Suddenly, a voice traveled out into Lin Fan's ears. Lin Fan's brows furrowed as he looked over at a corner of the walls. He saw a single pill hiding there, with the pill spirit within quivering in immense fear. Its eyes were clouded with a deep-rooted fear as though its heart was no longer functioning after this deep, dark trauma. Lin Fan looked at that pill as his heart skipped a beat. Don't eat me. The only remaining pill spirit could only plead out pitifully. When Lin Fan caught sight of that pill, he slammed his palm toward his mouth immediately, clutching it as he supported himself against the wall with his other hand. He was a moment too late, as a mouthful of vomit had already spilled out. Lin Fan swept his robes, and an exit burst wide open from the secret chamber immediately. Scram! Hurry up and scram, don't let me catch sight of you ever again. When the pill spirit caught sight of this, it bolted out in a frantic fluster without even having to think twice. Scary, way too scary, that demon was way too horrifying. He had swallowed so many of his friends. Not good, I think I've really contracted pilnorexia. Lin Fan's heart clenched up, feeling like he was truly sick right now. Chapter 1091 Invaders. Chapter 1091, Invaders. At the furthest place of the endless mainland, This was a region beyond which the Heavenly Lords had treaded at one time. But ever since the Heavenly Lords disappeared, immortal kings could only stop at this end. There was a jet-black ocean, with no ends in sight. This gigantic black ocean was extremely still and eerily silent. There were no waves on the water surface, as though everything had solidified. The skies above the ocean were pitch black, with ominously dark clouds, the same color as the ocean itself. This entire place reeked of death. Within all the major sects in the endless mainland were records of this place, which was called the Ocean of Death. There had once been a number of powerful beings who had wanted to head over to the ends of it to check it out. However, it was a one-way trip for all of them, they were never seen ever again. At this moment, on this vast and boundless ocean of death appeared a few spots of light. These few spots emitted a faint glow. If one hadn't been looking carefully, they wouldn't even have been able to make them out. Boom! Lightning flashed and thunder crackled endlessly while the light spots approached. Gradually, a few colossal black objects came into view. All of those colossal black objects had black thunderbolts coiling around their bodies, tugging at them. They seemed to be trying to break free from it. By the time they were finally close enough, those three colossal objects actually turned out to be three humongous ships. The front of those ships had the head of a mysterious beast perched on it, one that looked absolutely frightening. The eyes of those colossal beasts were blood red, and they gave off a vile, sinister aura. However, there were no records of such colossal beasts ever existing on the endless mainland. The three colossal ships came to a rest at the beachside. The bodies of those ships were extremely derelict and tattered, looking as though they had been through an absolutely destructive wreck. But even then, they still completed their duty of arriving at this place. A few days later, the colossal ships started moving as a series of figures appeared on them. As every figure stood on top of those colossal ships, they looked at everything before them and entered a deep contemplative state. Ha ha ha! All of a sudden, a crazed howl reverberated throughout the skies. That voice was absolutely horrifying, and filled with a trace of madness. On the middle colossal ship stood an extremely tall figure. Protected by his black armor and wielding a gigantic sword in his hand, he looked like the most sinister evil god in the entire universe. Leering down on the rest of the world, he spoke out softly, yet his voice caused the entire void to explode. Seems like everything was real. The indigenous lands. The oracle left down by the Master of Chaos did not deceive us. The gigantic figure roared out with his deranged laughter. Lord 8 of the God of War, we have been asleep for 10,000 years this time around. 3 of our God's arcs are damaged. A servant reported while kneeling on the ground. Oh, I hadn't expected for it to be this long, such that even the God's arcs are damaged. Forget it, set up the dimensional portal. Now that we've discovered such a piece of indigenous land, we must definitely conquer it. The 8 of the God of War spoke up. Yes, Lord. That servant stood up and immediately surveyed his surroundings left and right. Finally, he caught sight of a slightly secluded place where he took out a couple of weird-looking crystals. His lips twitched slightly as though he was chanting out some incantation. All of a sudden, those crystals burst out and floated up before forming a hexagram formation that was imprinted right onto the ocean of death. Lord, I've set it up. The servant reported politely. Yes, very good. The Master of Chaos was the only other person who had stepped foot onto this indigenous land. I, 8 of the God of War, Xiao Si, shall be the second one. All hands, gather, clean up the entire place in a radius of 10,000 miles from here. Xiao Si rallied. Yes, countless mysterious living beings wearing that same pitch-black armor swarmed down from those three gigantic gods' arcs, pushing forward with a formidable might. Heaven and Earth sect. Lin Fan opened his eyes wide. After the hard work he had done to get himself rocketing sky-high just by popping pills, he had gained quite a large amount of experience points. Right now, he wasn't all that far from the immortal king state. However, from this day forth, he might most probably not be able to pop down pills anymore, and was left with only killing others to level up. Using the weapon crafting legendary materials he had obtained from the senior old masters of the Kunlun God sect, Lin Fan had them all crafted into immortal weapons as well. However, to Lin Fan's disappointment, there wasn't even a single special item in there. That was truly extremely disappointing. But, oh well, one might as well forget it then. If he didn't craft out any, so be it then. There were more chances to come in the future anyway. Shing. Suddenly, Lin Fan felt his heart jerk. This was an extremely ominous sign. This was. All of a sudden, he bolted right up. Cleaving open the void, he dove right into them. The feeling earlier on was caused by the feedback from one of the legendary weapons he had created. That was a legendary weapon he had given to Lin Hanyu. If there were a feedback, she must naturally be in danger. Without any hesitation, Lin Fan bolted right over in that direction. 100 Flower Sect, just what in the world are they? How are all their moves so weird? I've got no idea, these aren't any normal powers at all. Not only that, their speed is extremely swift. All of them are masters of the sword Dao. Their strength is crazy explosive. There's no way we can hold out against them. To think that even the armor that they are wearing can have offensive capabilities. Earlier on, Junior's sister Hua landed a palm strike on them, but who knew that her entire palm would be minced away by the armor itself. As those female disciples of the 100 Flower Sect looked at these horrendous creatures before them, all of their faces were filled with fright and terror. And at this moment, the Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect was engaged in a duel with that gigantic figure. Not bad, not bad. You have quite a good figure. Befitting of being one of my, Xiaoxi's slaves. Xiaoxi burst out in wild laughter as that gigantic sword he wielded cleaved out right at the Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect. There were 7 mysterious gemstones embedded into that gigantic sword. Each time he waved it, those gemstones would sparkle with a dazzling brilliance. Be it in terms of speed or strength, they were all enhanced. Not only that, the gigantic sword brought with it fire, lightning, and all sorts of other powers. When it got closer, one could even feel the scorching blaze emanating from it. Right now, the Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect was having an extremely tough fight as she glared at the person before her in a furious rage. Just who in the world are you? Xiaoxi roared out in laughter before his face turned stern. Listen up. I am Xiaoxi, one of the 72 aides under the command of the Great Master God of War. All of you indigenous beings had better lay down and surrender right now. Otherwise, you shall all die. The Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect was bewildered in her heart. She had no idea at all who these people were. Who in the world was this Master God of War? What was up with this 72 aides and whatnot as well? Furthermore, all the names sounded extremely weird. She hadn't even heard any of them before. 100 Flowers appearance. Taking a step forward, the Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect waved out her palm and unleashed an unparalleled mystic skill. When Xiaoxi caught sight of everything before him, he could only let out a cold laugh. HMPH. Since you don't know what's good for you, you can just go to hell then. God technique, slaying doom. At that moment, Xiaoxi's body burst forth with a golden aura as he slammed down the gigantic sword in his hand, digging it right into the earth and cleaving it apart with a mighty force. Thunder, flames, all of those supernatural powers wrapped around the gigantic sword, generating a boost to its current status. The Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect felt her heart skip a beat as that unparalleled mystic skill of hers was destroyed entirely by the other party. The strength of this man before her was similar to hers, yet the gigantic sword he wielded was helping him boost his powers by a significant amount, rendering her entirely powerless. Ugh! The Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect spat out a mouthful of fresh blood as her face was drained from all color. Grand Master, you're not dead, right? Lin Hanyu rushed forward immediately and supported her Grand Master. If she had not been depending on that immortal weapon that her younger brother had given her, she would not have been much better off either. Ha ha ha, how about now? When Xiaoxi looked down at those ants, he could not help but roar out in a maddened laughter. He, Xiaoxi, was the greatest existence. I'm alright, but these people are way too strong. The weapons that they are wielding are way too sinister as well. The Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect exclaimed. Lin Hanyu was getting flustered right now as well. She too was starting to realize that these guys were well versed in combat. The gigantic sword in their hands seemed as though they could slice through every single thing out there. At the same time, they brought with them some supernatural strength that had the defenders completely powerless against them. All of you indigenous beings. If you don't wish to die, you had all better kneel down obediently. Xiaoxi said with authority. With the gigantic sword in his hand vibrating, everyone felt their hearts clenching. Dream on, Lin Hanyu yelled out. HMPH. Then death is the only path that awaits you. Xiaoxi roared out as he sliced down with that gigantic sword of his once more. When Lin Hanyu and the Grand Master of the 100 Flower Sect caught sight of this, their hearts skipped a beat. Clang, seems like I've still managed to get here in time. All of a sudden, a figure floated out between the heaven and earth, grabbing that gigantic sword with a single hand. When Lin Hanyu caught sight of the person who had arrived, she called out emotionally, "Little bro." At that moment, Lin Fan froze as well. He had a bloody strange feeling after grabbing hold of that sword. Chapter 1092 All slapped to death. Chapter 1092. all slapped to death. The cultivation base of this strange fella before them was clearly only that of a golden immortal full cultivation state. Perhaps, he could be considered to be half a step away from becoming an ancestor immortal. However, the amount of power bursting forth from that gigantic sword in his hands was actually that of an ancestor immortal. Not only that, this was definitely not an immortal weapon created by any sect or anything within the endless mainland. There were no laws of the immortal Tao coiling around it. Honestly, it was those 7 embedded gemstones that were giving off an incredible and strange power. Could this be some sort of a power body from the Western fantasies? Lin Fan was bewildered. The facial constructs of this person before him was dented and protruding at different angles. At the same time, both pairs of eyes were not black and white, instead, they were blue. As for the images etched onto those body armors, no matter how he looked at them, they looked like god spirits of the Western world. Let go, Xiaoxi roared out before hollering out, God technique, annihilating doom. At that moment, Lin Fan caught sight of those 7 gemstones embedded on the gigantic sword shining with a blinding light as a tremendous amount of power burst from it. With that, an immense repulsive force slammed out onto his palms. In the eyes of everyone else, that tremendous repulsive force was powerful beyond anything else. But for Lin Fan, it was just like a soft little tap on his body. He felt nothing at all about it. When Xiaoxi caught sight of everything, his eyes grew wide open in disbelief. He could not dare to believe that this indigenous being before him could be this formidable. That was a legendary weapon he was wielding, one that was embedded with the crystal cores of 7 super god beasts. Back where he came from, that was an extremely formidable legendary weapon. To think that this indigenous being here would actually be able to hold it in his hands without even tearing his skin. Damned indigenous being, go to, Xiaoxi roared out, wanting to burst forth with the powers of the god of war. But all of a sudden, a burst of astral wind struck out at him. Lin Fan had slapped down with a single palm. As though he was slapping a mosquito, it landed on the body of this fella. Bam! Disintegrated into dust. That initially formidable Xiaoxi had disintegrated away into nothingness just like that. There wasn't even a single scrap of him left at all. What's this sh*t? Lin Fan took the gigantic sword in his hand and observed it. Ding! Congratulations on discovering super legendary weapon God of War 7 sword. Lin Fan plucked out the 7 gemstones and held them up in his hand. Looking at them left and right, he realized that the power contained within them was simply way too weak. He went on to pinch slightly with his fingers. Crack! The 7 crystal cores shattered out and turned into stardust that spilled out into the air. When all of the invading servants caught sight of how Xiaoxi was killed by a single slap of the other party, their faces were filled with looks of horror. He just killed the Lord Aid of the God of War with a single slap. Ah, those were the 7 crystal cores of the super god beasts. They are supposed to be indestructible. To think that this guy would have pinched and crushed them. Just what in the world is this indigenous being? Does he not know just how precious those crystal cores are? Those 7 crystal cores of the super god beasts are practically priceless. You can only purchase a single one of those with 1 billion purple crystals. Run, hurry up and run. That indigenous being is way too scary. There's no way we're a match for him at all. All of those servants were absolutely aghast right now. Thus, all of them bolted off and tried escaping far, far away as though they had bumped into ghosts. Lin Fan looked at everything before him and frowned. As he lifted up his hand gently, the void suddenly exploded out as a gigantic palm appeared between the heaven and earth, which then pummeled down onto those escaping servants. Boom! The entire ground quaked out as dust clouds spread everywhere. Under this single palm strike of Lin Fan's, all of those servants were disintegrated into dust, without even a single scrap left. Just what sort of a background do these guys have? There doesn't seem to be any other being just like them in the endless mainland, right? Lin Fan was truly starting to get a little suspicious now. However, as to where they hailed from, it didn't matter to him in the least bit. After all, as they said, what will come, will come. Remembering what they said, they referred to them as indigenous beings. Did this mean that they had just discovered this place? Watching everything before them, the disciples of the 100 Flower sect were all absolutely dumbfounded by now. They could not believe everything that was happening before them. Horrifying. Way too horrifying. All of those formidable invaders were extremely strong, such that they were not even prepared to fight back at all. But for this man who was floating up in the void right now, all of them seemed like nothing more than ants. With just a single casual slap of his, he had all of them crushed to death. Lin Hanyu flew up into the void, little brother. Uproar. Everyone who did not know about it in the 100 Flower sect went into a complete state of shock. What did she just say? To think that junior sister Lin would have floated up into the void and addressed this powerful being as her younger brother. What in the world was their relationship? When the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect caught sight of everything, her eyes flashed with a bright glint. She had not expected that Lin Hanyu's younger brother would have been this strong. This was completely unexpected. Big sister, are you all right? Lin Fan asked. I'm all right. Lin Hanyu nodded her head. Little brother, how did you find out that I was in danger? Lin Fan smiled out. I had felt the feedback that was coming forth from the immortal weapon that I've given you. Therefore, I rushed over from the sect. Lin Hanyu nodded her head in happiness. She had not expected that not only did her younger brother not blame her for everything that had happened back then, he had even rushed out all the way to save her. This was something that had her extremely touched. Then, Lin Fan came down with Lin Hanyu to the 100-Flower Sect. The Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect rushed over immediately. There was no way she could tell Lin Fan's cultivation state at all. Not only that, the 100-Flower Sect had not caught wind of what happened to the Kunlun God Sect yet. If they knew, they would have long been frightened to death. All of the female disciples of the 100-Flower Sect looked over at Lin Fan with bated breaths. To think that such a powerful being would be junior sister Lin's younger brother. All of them started whirling with thoughts in their minds. Looking at the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect, Lin Fan only nodded his head in acknowledgement. The backgrounds of these people seemed to be somewhat mysterious. It would be safer for the 100-Flower Sect to relocate to some other place. This was Lin Fan's suggestion. Whether or not the other party took heed, it would be none of his business anymore. Even though the strength of those people who were here earlier on was extremely low, they were practically powerful amongst powerful beings for the 100-Flower Sect. If not for the fact that Lin Fan had rushed over in time, the 100-Flower Sect would have basically ceased to exist after being mowed down completely by the other party. After hearing those words, the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect went into a deep, contemplative state of mind. She truly did not know what she should do. Big sister, you've got to come with me. It's only going to get more dangerous over here. By the looks of those people earlier on, they seem to only be the vanguard. As for how scary the upcoming powerful beings would be, I have no way of telling at all. Lin Fan said. He was not prepared to leave Lin Hanyu behind here. Lin Hanyu hesitated before turning over to her Grand Master. Grand Master, let us relocate please. You've witnessed the situation from earlier yourself as well. If those people were to come again, the losses might be heavy. The Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect shook her head. If we leave this place, where can we head to? Lin Hanyu looked over at Lin Fan, not knowing how to resolve this matter. Lin Fan's face revealed no emotions. Head over to the Heaven and Earth Sect then. Thinking back to those virgins of the Heaven and Earth Sect, Lin Fan could not help but sigh out. This is the most that your senior brother can help you, boys. Whether or not you all can get to succeed will have to depend on yourselves. When the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect heard this, her heart leapt with joy. This was what she had wanted. If they could build a closer relationship with the Heaven and Earth Sect, it would be an extremely good thing for the 100-Flower Sect. With that, the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect agreed to it as she let out a smile. Let's set off then, Lin Fan said. Spreading his fingers open, he grabbed out at the 100-Flower Sect. Just like that, he uprooted the entire 100-Flower Sect with a single hand and lifted it up above his head. A power of this level was something that had everyone completely shivering in fright. When the Grand Master of the 100-Flower Sect saw this, she too was equally stunned. Who in the world could possibly compare with such profound powers? Chapter 1093 Why Ask Me? Chapter 1093 Why Ask Me? Heaven and Earth Sect. All the disciples were excited beyond anything right now after experiencing that miraculous event of immortal pills descending. Their respect toward senior brother Lin knew no boundaries. They could not wait to even bow down and lick his toes in respect. Right at this moment, some of the disciples were getting the shock of their lives when they caught sight of a gigantic black mass approaching them from the distant skies. Attack! Attack! The Kunlun God Sect has come for revenge. Hurry and go report this. The Heaven and Earth Sect hadn't messed with anyone recently other than the Kunlun God Sect. However, the Kunlun God Sect couldn't possibly be this powerful that they were ready for their counterattack after such a short period of time, right? When the Vice Grand Masters of the sect caught sight of that black mass far in the distance, their brows knitted slightly, not understanding just what was going on either. There's no need for worry. It's your senior brother Lin. But soon, one of the Vice Grand Masters spoke up. Only, he did not know just what that disciple was up to once more. What the hell was he bringing back a bloody mountain for? That seems to be the mountain of the 100-flower sect, isn't it? A sharp-eyed disciple exclaimed out. What? 100-flower sect? What is Senior Brother Lin trying to do here? Why did he bring over the entire mountain of the 100-flower sect? Holy FCK, Senior Brother Lin is not thinking about turning the 100-flower sect into a hot pot too, is he? That's way too scary. I heard that the 100-flower sect is filled with beauties to the brim. Will Senior Brother Lin end up killing all of those beauties? What are you blindly guessing at? Do you think that Senior Brother Lin is someone like that? The disciples conversed in their hushed whispers secretively. All of them had heard of the 100-flower sect before. That was a sect with a bevy of beauties. There were countless virgin bachelors who were always keeping their eyes out for those beauties in that sect. But well, one could look at how things were now. Senior Brother Lin had literally uprooted the entire 100-flower sect as a whole and brought it back to the sect. They did not even know if all of those beautiful disciples within that sect had been killed off by Senior Brother Lin or not. If they had really been killed, that would be one hell of a heartbreaking scene. From the void, Lin Fan tossed the entire 100-flower sect to a side of the heaven and earth sect, considering his task done. All of you head back to the sect first. I'll go discuss something with the old master. Lin Fan did not say much as he headed toward the depths of the heaven and earth sect. At the same time, he left down some orders for the watchful disciples. The 100-flower sect will temporarily reside in the heaven and earth sect. All of you guys take good care of them. Whether or not you can find your other halves will depend on your own doings. However, if anyone dares to force themselves on someone else, don't blame me for destroying you. ... What? The 100-flower sect will be residing within the heaven and earth sect temporarily. FCK me, Senior Brother Lin is way too incredible, isn't he? To think that he could even scam the entire 100-flower sect back. Could that have been a hint from Senior Brother Lin to us? He knew that we're all bachelors. Hence, he's giving us the opportunity to interact with these beauties. I think that is highly likely to be the case. What are we still standing here dumbly for? Hurry up and go host them properly. If any of those junior sisters were to take a liking to us, we could graduate from this career of being a bachelor. I love Senior Brother. Senior Brother loves me. From this day forth, I shall bow down in servitude to Senior Brother Lin for my entire life. All of you had better listen up. Fair competition now. If anyone dares to play dirty, I'm going to report you over to Senior Brother Lin. That's for sure. We're all disciples of the heaven and earth sect. We've got to treat them courteously. ... This time around, Lin Fan had truly done a tremendous deed. All of the countless disciples from the heaven and earth sect would always remember how good Senior Brother Lin was to them. Where else in the world would they go to find such a wonderful senior brother? They had finally understood that Senior Brother was just thinking with their happiness in his heart. In the hearts of all of these disciples, Senior Brother Lin was the best Grandmaster candidate ever. When the other Grandmaster candidates caught sight of this, they could not help but sigh out gently in their hearts. Seems like there was truly no hope left for any of them to take on the Grandmaster seat anymore. However, they did have some interest toward the beautiful ladies of the 100-flower sect as well. Cultivating daily caused their days to feel extremely dry. If they could somehow find their other halves, this would be quite a decent thing to do as well. ... In the depths of the sect. This was a separate dimension that was cleaved open by the old masters. The spirit chi here was rich, and there was even a mysterious aura mixed with it. This was a place that could bring about a tremendous benefit for any martial artist. Therefore, for those disciples who had performed a great merit, the biggest reward they could hope to achieve was to enter this place to cultivate. At the same time, there were even shards of Tao comprehension scattered around the place, created by the old masters through their understandings of the heavens and earth. If any disciple were to comprehend them, their cultivation states would naturally skyrocket tremendously. Old Master! Old Master! The moment Lin Fan entered the depths of the sect, he started yelling out. Right now, Lin Fan's status in the sect was exceptional. Other than the old master, he was the most incredible existence. Even the Grand Master was extremely pleased with him. If not for the fact that the experience points for his twisting heaven and earth had already been maxed out, all of the old masters and the Grand Master would definitely not be able to escape the grasp of Lin Fan's evil hands. This was something they should be extremely grateful for. I'm over here. Stop shouting now. Zhang Yangtian came out of the void. What's wrong? And what's with this 100-flower sect affair as well? Right now, Zhang Yangtian had truly half given up on this disciple. He could not figure out what this lad was doing at all. For the issue with the Kunlun God sect, he could just let it be and forget about it now. But, What was with this disciple uprooting the entire 100-flower sect to implant them over at the Heaven and Earth sect? If any other sects were to find out about this, they would definitely be rife with gossips. The affair of the 100-flower sect has an extremely important correlation to what I'm about to tell you right now. Old Master, do you know anything about this sh*t? Lin Fan took out the gigantic sword and tossed it over. Looking at the gigantic sword, Zhang Yangtian's brows furrowed. He observed it carefully. There are 7 dents. Something should have been in them, right? Yes, there were 7 crystal cores. But I've crushed all of them. Lin Fan replied. Zhang Yangtian entered a deep contemplative state, then pointed out at the void. Instantly, from within the endless void shot out rows and rows of bookshelves. These bookshelves were as tall as the heaven itself. This was where the depths of the Heaven and Earth sect's resources lay. Every single thing that had happened in the endless mainland after the sect was created were all recorded within this place. Those people did not seem like they were beings of the endless mainland. Lin Fan said. Zhang Yangtian shook his head. The endless mainland is extremely huge, and there are many places that we do not know of just yet. I'll have to look through the records of our sect right now to see if anything was mentioned about this. A single thought allowed him to screen through millions of books. It didn't take long before Zhang Yangtian's eyes bolted wide open, filled with shock. Those people that you came across. Did they happen to look like this? At that moment, an illusory figure appeared out in the void. That figure was wielding a staff, with a crystal object the size of a basketball perched right on top of it. In that illusory image, that figure was chanting out some mysterious incantation, when all of a sudden, the entire world turned into a patch of fiery red, as an endless number of blazing meteors plummeted down from the skies. Holy FCK! Meteor storm! When Lin Fan caught sight of that, he could not help but exclaim out. After all, that was an image he was familiar with. Before he had crossed over to the Xuanwang world, Lin Fan had read countless of novels and played an endless myriad of games. Wasn't that a bloody wizard? Lin Fan pressed on impatiently. What is the background of these people? How did they appear in the endless mainland? Zhang Yangtian finally understood the situation. They did not arrive at the endless mainland. These people are living beings of the endless mainland. According to the records of our sect, these people reside on the other end of the ocean of death. In the past, they had come over a long time ago. However, they disappeared eventually. As for the details of the event, there are none of them. At that time, the Heaven and Earth sect was yet to be established. All of this information was found from the remnants of everything left behind. Lin Fan nodded his head. He wasn't someone of the endless mainland either. Based on all the novels that he had read in the past, those were most probably Westerners. Are their professions wizards, swordsmen, berserkers, beasts, elves? And not only that, do they possess 7 different styles of magic? Lin Fan asked. Zhang Yangtian was bewildered. Why did you come and ask me when you're even clearer about their traits than I am? Lin Fan. Chapter 1094 Good and Evil Buddha Sect. Chapter 1094. Good and Evil Buddha Sect. Then what is up with the situation of the 100-flower sect? Zhang Yangtian had a bad feeling about this. Lin Fan pondered for a moment. I have someone of my family in the 100-flower sect, and the sect was being surrounded by those people earlier on. If I hadn't gotten there in time, they might have been annihilated by the enemy by now. They've appeared again. Zhang Yangtian's heart tensed up a little. However, he wasn't all that bothered by it. Even though these guys were invaders, the sects of the endless mainland were not so easily bullied either. And, even if these guys were really all here, at most, they would just have to chase them back where they came from. Therefore, Zhang Yangtian naturally wasn't overly concerned with it. There were few people who truly knew about the ins and outs of the entire issue. And even if anyone did know, they were probably all the extremely old fogies. We'll leave this matter as such first. As to where they hail from, we do not know even at this moment. Zhang Yangtian replied. Lin Fan nodded his head and wasn't overly concerned either. Yes. I guess we'll just have to wait and see first. But just in case, I'll have the 100-flower sect reside in the Heaven and Earth sect for the time being. Once everything tides over, I'll observe how the general situation plays out. After that, Lin Fan conversed with Zhang Yangtian for a little more regarding some other issues before taking his leave. The original place where the 100-flower sect resided was a gigantic palm imprint on the ground, creating a trench. No signs of any life were left there, the entire place filled with a deathly silence. Ever since the 100-flower sect was taken away from this place, there was a desolate feeling about it. At that moment, a sound transmitted over. In the deep trench that was created, a figure struggled and stood up with extreme difficulty. Looking at everything around him, his mind then flashed back to that horrific sight from earlier on. That had his heart skipping a furious beat. As though he had just seen a ghost, he then struggled and raced for the place where they had arrived at. Ocean of Death. That person walked right into the dimensional portal. He had to report everything that he came across here. The strength of the indigenous beings that resided here was extremely strong. Even the Lord Aid of the God of War had been slain by them. Their entire army was defeated. Completely defeated. In another mysterious secret ground in the endless mainland, a place where no one else could gain access to. Thud. Suddenly, a figure appeared out in the midst of this secret ground. However, his method of arrival was somewhat different. It was as though he had just been dropped into this place from somewhere else. When the person caught sight of the situation of the secret ground, he burst out in a wild laughter. Ha ha, the treasure ground left down by my ancestors. This was a real place indeed. Seems like this is the intended destination I wanted to arrive at. This man was extremely young. Now that his cultivation base had reached the golden immortal state, arriving at this place had his spirits literally skyrocketing. He knew that the time had come for his lucky encounter. As long as he were to get the treasures in this secret ground, his cultivation state would definitely rocket up into the skies from this day forth. But at that moment, there was a particular stone tablet that caught his attention. Boundless future. Buddha is merciful. Boundless future Buddha Lord. Looking at this tablet before him, the eyes of the young man shone with an even more brilliant gleam. Being of affinity, you have arrived. At that moment, a bright Buddha voice rang out from all directions. The young man was startled for a moment before putting up his guard. Who are you? Amitabha. Being of affinity, since you have arrived, come on and then. I am the boundless future Buddha Lord. After hearing that, the expression of that young man turned even more emotional. He then walked in right away. At that moment, the entire scene changed. All of a sudden, the path ahead of him was lit up with a brilliant golden light. Under a tree far in the distance was a monk who was seated cross-legged with his eyes shut. The Buddhist light at the back of his head shone brightly and illuminated the heaven and hell. Behind his body was an extremely mysterious gear that was revolving slowly. Each time it made a single turn, the entire void around it would tremble slightly as though the Buddha was becoming one with the heaven and earth. Who are you? The young man was startled by the sight before him. This was the first time he had come across something as such. I am you, and you are me. Even though the lips of that monk did not move, the voice found its way into the mind of the young man. Freezing up for a moment, the young man continued, don't come here and try anything funny. I came here seeking my encounter. I am your encounter. With that, the eyes of the monk bolted wide open. From them, a brilliant golden Buddhist light was emitted. You. The young man was taken aback. Through those eyes, he could make out a trace of coldness. Without any hesitation, he sprinted back where he came from. He could feel that he was definitely no match for this monk before him. It was only by leaving this place he could go back to safety. Amitabha, I am boundless. I am the future. Why do you choose to run upon seeing me? Come back. The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up calmly. But suddenly, the aura of his entire body changed as an extremely sharp aura burst out of him. Devour. A gigantic Buddha head appeared between the heaven and earth. Opening its huge mouth, it swallowed that young man in a single mouthful. Indeed, an incarnation encompasses the infinite worlds and works its way in full circles. Even though this is only a golden immortal cultivation state, it is more than enough. At that moment, the monk stood up as his eyes flashed with a sinister glint. Under that tree, another figure appeared suddenly. This figure had no aura, and was just seated there cross-legged. Since you guys refuse to believe that I, future, am able to accomplish the heavenly Lord state, I, future, can only proceed while defying the heavens and attain my unparalleled Buddha fruits. They have arrived, and with them, the great accomplishments of I, the boundless future Buddha Lord, shall bloom as well. The boundless future Buddha Lord smiled out calmly, causing everything around him to shatter. Be it the secret ground or the void, everything disintegrated into smoke before vanishing between the heaven and earth. Selfless demon ancestor, this game of chess that you've started has only just begun. Right after that, the boundless future Buddha Lord disappeared from the face of the world. Good and evil Buddha sect. This was one of the 9 major sects, with a boundless Buddhist light covering it and a vast Buddhist nature enveloping the entire world it was located in. In this harmonious and peaceful place, there were no demons or monsters who would dare to come and act brazenly here. And just at this moment, countless disciples raised their heads up. They had discovered that there was a surging Buddhist power spreading over across the skies in a place far away. When they finally caught sight of the true face of that force, all of the disciples were stunned. On a lotus seat sat a golden Buddha, with the future gears revolving around slowly. The future had begun. Amitabha, all of you disciples, why aren't you guys kneeling down upon coming to face your Buddha? N-O-V-E in .c Om. When all of those disciples caught sight of this Buddha, their hearts skipped a beat. Even though they did not know who this person before them was, they could suddenly feel a tremendous repressing force crushing down on them. It was as though the force was just suppressing their spirits and forcing them to kneel down and receive him. A magical cloud revolved around the boundless future Buddha Lord, as he seemed like the only thing that could exist within the entire world. Everything else would just disintegrate into nothingness. Convert. The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up gently before extending his Buddha hand slowly and grabbing out at the good and evil Buddha sect. That Buddha hand shone with a sparkling bright golden light that seemed boundless. Under this palm, the entire good and evil Buddha sect seemed exceptionally insignificant. All of the disciples could feel themselves turning extremely insignificant under the might of that Buddha palm, having no way of resisting it at all. At that moment, a Buddhist voice boomed out and spread in the entire world. The might of the Buddha had descended, and was cleansing the entire world. Ancestor Master, you have descended down the path of the evil Buddha. Why have you chosen to return? Within the depths of the good and evil Buddha sect floated a series of lotuses. Floating out in the void, they formed a gigantic lotus that stood against the gigantic Buddha hand to defend against it. What is mine, will be mine. No one will be able to take that away from me. The tone of ruthlessness in the voice of the boundless future Buddha Lord turned even stronger as that gigantic lotus started breaking apart. It was no match at all against this might. Even though all of you juniors may be Buddha Lords as well, there are different classes and grades of Buddha Lords. You are all nothing but lower grade Buddha Lords. If you do not convert, the only path that awaits you is death. Amitabha. At that moment, a bold Buddha voice retaliated from the depths of the good and evil Buddha sect. However, it was eventually drowned out by that single palm of the boundless future Buddha Lord, and finally, silence ensued. Chapter 1095 Chop People Up. Chapter 1095, Chop People Up. Lin Fan did not linger too long back in the sect. As for Jin Zhenggu and Chu Zanyu, the two of them had wandered outside to roam and explore on their own blindly as well. Now that the 100-Flower sect was over at the side of the Heaven and Earth sect, there was naturally no concern toward their safety. As for those strange fellas, if they dared to appear again, the only solution would just be to kill them. Therefore, no one really bothered too much about that. 10 days later, Lin Fan found himself standing before a secret ground in the Endless Mainland. It was only until the initiation of the Endless Mainland that Lin Fan had discovered that they had been living within a secret ground for the entire time. It had been quite a number of years since he had arrived at the Endless Mainland by now. Lin Fan wondered whether his current strength was enough to save them out of that place. Pishu. As he entered the secret ground, all of those monsters within it raised their heads over. However, they returned to rest right after. They could sense a familiar aura from Lin Fan's body. A stone gate blocked Lin Fan's path ahead. Behind this stone gate was none other than the ancient saint world. He wondered how things were like back in the ancient saint world right now. In the next instant, he slapped out with his palm. Boom! The stone gate did not budge in the slightest bit. That single palm strike contained all of Lin Fan's powers, yet it still could not do anything to this stone gate at all. That had him frowning slightly, feeling somewhat incredulous toward everything. Could it be that my strength is still far from strong enough? Lin Fan was extremely bothered in his heart. At the same time, there was a crushing sense of defeat. The flame of pills through thought. This was a flame created by the system and could incinerate everything in this world. Thinking of that, Lin Fan placed his palm on the surface of the stone gate. Sizzle, sizzle. After burning for a long time, there was still no use. It didn't even leave a single mark on the stone gate. How could this be? Lin Fan sighed out. To think that everything would be useless. That flame was a product of the system. How could it have no use at all? This was absolutely mind-boggling. Can you guys hear me? Lin Fan patted out on the stone gate, hoping that the people within could hear him. But after a long time, there wasn't a single response at all. Highs. Shaking his head, Lin Fan sighed out in helplessness. Seemed like his strength was still not enough to break this stone gate apart. Right now, his cultivation state had already reached the immortal lord state. He was just that step away from that immortal king state. Lin Fan stood in front of the stone gate for a long, long time. He was lost in a daze, having no idea how things were in the ancient saint world right now. But, at the very least, he could guarantee that there would absolutely be no conflicts over at the side of the ancient saint world right now. After the demonic gods and utmost powerful beings found out that they were all living within a secret ground, all of them had lost any heart to fight for the ephemeral and feudal power and status back in that world. Lin Fan was a little disappointed as he left the secret ground. He truly had not expected that he would not be able to open up the secret ground at all even with his current strength. This was really unsatisfactory. Yet, Lin Fan's greater headache right now was that his cultivation state required him to chop down people for him to level up further. However, who in the world would dare to let him chop them down right now? Did he really have to just go and provoke the other sects for no reason right now? This was quite the critical problem right now that required him to think things through properly. Boom, but right at that moment, there was some activity going on up in the void. Raising his head up, Lin Fan's emotions were stirred. To think that it would be an immortal weapon that was flying across. Just as Lin Fan was prepared to head up, it suddenly struck him that there must be countless of people who knew about him in the endless mainland by now. If he were to head out just like that, he would definitely scare the sh*t out of the other party. By then, if they started to kneel down and beg for mercy, how could he be willing to make a move on them anymore? However, none of those were issues. Lin Fan had a legendary weapon for changing one's appearances. After changing his facial features, he dove right into the void. This was a middle-grade flying immortal weapon, with a group of people seated on top of it. Their faces were dark and grim, in fact, some of them were even crying out. At that moment, a voice rang over, giving the people on the immortal weapon quite a shock. But when they looked over and caught sight of that face, they heaved a sigh of relief before asking out warily, "May I ask who you are?" "Ask your mother. Do you think that the great name of your daddy is something that you guys can ask just like that?" Lin Fan was extremely arrogant right now while sniggering out in his heart. With him acting so cocky, the other party would definitely be thoroughly enraged and declare to cleave him down with a single chop or something. By then, the mood would definitely be good. But to Lin Fan's astonishment, the person who had asked him for his name suddenly bawled out into tears. "No, vel be in .c ohm." And if this were the only person crying, then he might as well let it be. After all, there were still other people around. But, it didn't take long before the crying chain reaction began and everyone surrounding him broke out into tears. When Lin Fan heard those cries, he could take it no longer. The one thing he was most afraid of hearing was men's cries. Could you guys have some backbone or something? Your daddy hasn't even done anything to you guys. All I did was be a little fierce, but why are you guys crying as such? Even after those words, the cries did not come to an end. "If you guys dare to cry again, your daddy is going to chop you guys to death." Lin Fan roared. "Kill us then, we're too ashamed to want to continue living in this world anymore. The sect has raised me up and yet I couldn't do anything at all. What's the purpose of me living in this world any longer? Boo-hoo, kill us please, yes, just kill us and everything will be over once and for all. Master. Grandmaster. Junior brother." At that moment, the entire void seemed to be filled with nothing but cries. All of them were bawling out at the top of their lungs as though they had just received some immense blow. It was absolutely gut-smashing. Lin Fan blinked his eyes blankly. The plan that he had thought up was completely useless by now. He then patted one of them on the shoulders and consoled. "Highs, as a man, you've got stand strong and tall. There's no trench that you can never ever cross. Come tell me, what are you guys crying about? If there's a vengeance, pay it back. If there's a grudge, seek revenge. If you're alive, there's no need to worry about there being no hope ever again, right?" All of those disciples shook their heads. "No, you don't understand. You'll never ever understand the pain in our hearts right now. Even though our sect isn't all that big, we were leading an extremely blissful life. But right now, it's all gone. Everything is gone. The Grand Master is gone. Our senior brothers and sisters are gone. Right now, we're the only ones left alive. Tell us, what should we do?" Yes, they were way too cruel. Senior brother was even sliced into two by them. Lin Fan was feeling exasperated right now. There was no helping it, this was reality in the endless mainland. The concept was of either destroying others or being destroyed. There was no space for weaklings to ever survive. They were nothing but ants in the hands of the truly powerful beings. When they wanted to squish someone to death, they could just do so without having to hesitate in the slightest bit. Who destroyed your sect? As long as you know them, it's all good. If you cultivate hard and well in the future, you guys will still be able to chop them up. Lin Fan tried consoling once more. We don't know who they are. Lin Fan was speechless. You guys are quite something, aren't you? To think that you wouldn't even know who the people who had destroyed your sects were. That's quite miserable, isn't it? They were so cruel, so vile. Even though our senior brothers were clearly dead, those people draped in black robes had even revived our senior brothers and commanded them to attack us. There's no way we could bear to fight them like that. There were so many skeletons, and those skeletons possessed a tremendous amount of strength. No matter how we tried killing, we just couldn't kill them to death. Revive, skeletons. Lin Fan was startled as he grabbed someone immediately. Hurry and tell me. Did the people who went over to carry your sect carry extremely huge swords with them? Were some of them holding on to black rods or something? Yes, that's right. The moment Lin Fan heard that, he was stunned. Holy FCK. Why the FCK didn't you guys say that earlier on? Bloody hell, that wasted your daddy's precious time crapping with you guys over here for so long. At that moment, Lin Fan changed back his appearance right away. Bloody hell, to think that those bunch of fellas were back again. How in the world could he have not known about this? All of those disciples were completely scared off by Lin Fan. But when they caught sight of his face, they were just completely frozen. It's him. It's really him. Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect. That's my idol. I'm finally catching sight of my idol in real life. But by then, Lin Fan had already flown away far into the distance. At the same time, his heart was filled with joy. There were finally people for him to chop now. Chapter 1096. Why had things come to this? 1096. Why had things come to this? Roar. This once magnificent sect was now derelict and in a state of ruins, where dust clouds spread everywhere. There were countless strange-looking figures that were surrounding this dilapidated sect right now. Roar. A gigantic dragon with 2 wings on its back was growling out furiously. Spanning 100 feet tall, each time it opened its mouth, a ferocious dragon breath shot out. Wherever the breath passed, everything was evaporated into nothingness. Standing on the body of this gigantic dragon was a man wielding a long spear and donning an ornate piece of armor. He was just like the king of the 9 heavens, looking down on the rest of the world in disdain. Below the gigantic dragon stood figures draped with black robes one after another. All of them were chanting out some incantations in their mouths, causing the pitch-black magic wands they were wielding to emit off a vile and sinister power. The ground quaked as though there was an endless legion of howling undead spirits underneath. One after another, sets of white bones were revived from under the ground. Some of these white bones shone with a silvery glow, some with a golden glow while others having a rainbow glow to them. It was a bedazzling gleam, however, their aura was an exact opposite, being frosty and chilling. They were just like the vile demons of the 9 hells themselves. To think that the bodies of these indigenous beings would be this strong. The undead spirits created from them are pretty darn strong indeed. An elderly figure waved out the wand in his hand, and all of a sudden, those disciples that had died in the battle seemed as though they were possessed by something and bolted upright. At the beginning, the movements of these corpses were somewhat rigid. But gradually, they began to regain some fluidity. At the same time, their eyes were pitch black, looking extremely horrifying. When the dragon knight riding on the dragon looked down on everything before him, he remarked in a bright voice, to think that everything was real. After 10,000 years, they had finally arrived here and laid down the dimensional portal. For the sake of our master, we shall bring down glory on the rest of the world. Everyone shall have to bow down under the magnificent brilliance of our master. The moment he lifted his hand, the elderly figure which could summon the undead looked over at the Dragon Knight with a pair of lifeless eyes. Dragon Knight Jace, we have to wait for the arrival of the great army and must not act brashly. Because of you, we were already forced to have all the indigenous beings here slain. If this were to arouse the attention of all the other indigenous beings in this place, that would definitely impede our march. Andrew, don't you think that all these undead spirits of the indigenous beings that you are controlling over right now are the spoils of war? Dragon Knight Jace asked. The place where they were from was called the Moon Shadow Mainland. There were initially many races in that place. However, after the development over countless of years, it had already been unified as all the different races bore a single universal identity. All of them had absolute faith toward the 72 Master Gods. As a part of the Dragon Knight denomination, his faith lay in the Dragon Knight Master God. Bringing with him the glorious splendor of the Dragon Knights, he would ensure that he spilled over a little of that same glory onto every single indigenous being he encountered. They would be given the honor of becoming slaves to dedicate their entire lives to the great Master God. Andrew was satisfied right now, but of course. The bodies of these indigenous beings are simply way too strong. The mysterious power that they wield is even more fascinating. I suppose that I should definitely research on them properly after heading back to see if I can create even stronger undead spirits with them. Damn it, damn it. At that moment, a young man struggled to crawl up and stand in the ruins, wielding a longsword in his hands. His entire body was stained with nothing but fresh blood. However, the moment he caught sight of everything before him, his heart sank as though he had just lost every single last bit of hope. WHO in the world are you guys? Why the hell did you have to destroy my sect? The young man howled out as his body was coiled by an unrivaled killing intent. A torrential wrath burst forth from him and pierced right into the skies above, causing the entire heaven and earth to quake because of it. When Andrew looked at this indigenous being that was still alive at this very moment, his lips curled into an extremely sinister and creepy smile, to think that the strongest indigenous being isn't dead yet. That must be the reason why the strongest undead being isn't created just yet. The gigantic dragon that Dragon Knight Jace was riding on sneezed out slightly, as though it wanted to have this indigenous being killed in a single breath. Andrew stood forth and stopped it. Don't strike out. The research value of this indigenous being is extremely high. I have to preserve his full corpse. Indigenous being, bow down and declare your allegiance to me, Andrew. I can bring you to witness the glorious brilliance of the undead god personally. Andrew spoke up. Undead god. This young man was none other than the Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect. The longsword in his hand was quivering slightly in fear, as though it was being afraid of this unknown terror awaiting them. However, his heart wasn't fearful in the slightest bit, instead, it was filled with wrath. Even if I die, I will make sure you guys pay the price. The young man bellowed out as the hatred within his eyes shot out endlessly. It was as though he could explode at any moment right now. Andrew shook his head before lifting his hand and chanting out slightly. Click, clack, all those disciples of the sect that Andrew had transformed into undead spirits took up their swords and surrounded this young man lifelessly. When the young man caught sight of all his previous disciples, his heart clenched up tightly as though he was in a deep pain. Elders, disciples, what's wrong with you guys? The young man reared his head into the sky and howled out. He could not feel any bit of life from these disciples of his at all. All of these people who were just filled with life earlier on were now gone with the wind. Arg-hhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh. His that had turned into undead spirits. Shing, wherever the sword chi passed by, everything was destroyed. He stabbed the longsword deep through the chest of an undead spirit disciple. Grand Master. The undead spirit disciple extended his hand and grabbed the longsword in his hands. The young man's head bolted up right away as he looked at this disciple before him, eyes streaming with tears of blood. Yes, Grand Master is here. Why do you have to kill me? The undead spirit disciple opened his mouth and spoke out softly. But, when the voice traveled into the ears of the young man, it exploded out like thunder. The young man's head dropped low right away as he cried out, why? He then lifted his head, don't worry. Your Grand Master will take revenge for you. Bam, sword chi sliced out as that undead spirit disciple shattered apart right away. Degenerates, I'm going to kill you guys. The young man howled out in wrath. No matter how severely injured he was right now, he would definitely have to take revenge for his disciple. Andrew's eyes sparkled with a glint of surprise, to think that the will of this indigenous being would be this strong. If I were to refine him into one of my undead spirits, he would definitely make a remarkable undead spirit slave. Sword slays the mountains and rivers. The young man bellowed out as his longsword streaked right into the void and sliced at it. That formidable sword intent pierced through the void and struck out at Andrew. When Andrew caught sight of this, his lips curled into a grin, oh, mighty undead god. Do allow your noble might to descend upon this place. Sealing technique, abysmal swamp, land of undead spirits. At that moment, gigantic star pentagrams floated out one after another in front of Andrew, with a terrifying darkness and a horrifying aura of death reeking out of them. Broop, broop. All of a sudden, the firm ground beneath the young man turned into a patch of swamp that was bubbling with a jet black liquid. From within, skeletal hands appeared one after another that grabbed out at the legs of that young man, trying to drag him down into this endless abyss. At the same time, that sword chi that he had struck out into the air was suddenly grabbed onto by demonic pitch-black hands one after another, dragging it into that land of the undead spirits. How could this be? When the young man caught sight of this, his heart was anguished beyond anything else. Why must the enemies be this strong and yet he was only this weak? Spear of the undead. At that moment, Andrew's finger pointed out into the void, causing it to tremble slightly. A penetrative power that was filled with an aura of death burst forth from it. With that, a pitch-black spear pushed itself out of the void bit by bit. Go, Pishu, no, vel, b, in c, ohm. That spear of the undead exploded forth, darting right for the chest of that young man. When the young man caught sight of that spear of the undead, his heart was filled with grief, indignation, and despair at the same time. Chapter 1097 Arrival of the Master Gods. Chapter 1097 Arrival of the Master Gods. Who are you? Suddenly, Andrew's face changed slightly. He had not expected that at this critical moment, there would be an unexpected change in events. To think that there would be another indigenous being that would appear, and would even have caught his spear of undead with his bare hands. Appearing before the young man, Lin Fan pointed out with his finger, stopping the spear of undead with his fingertip alone. Are you all right? Lin Fan asked. The Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect opened his eyes. When he caught sight of everything before him, his heart skipped a beat. What are you? Heaven and Earth sects Lin Fan. Lin Fan replied casually before grabbing the long spear which gave off an extremely mysterious energy. This energy was not the same as the powers here in this world. At the same time, there was even a dark and sinister aura that reeked of death lingering around it. Flicking his wrist gently, Lin Fan swung the spear right back. Pishu. Being repelled back, the spear tore out a black trail in its flight through the void, causing a gigantic sonic boom to burst out due to its incredible speed that tore the void right apart. When Andrew caught sight of everything before him, his heart tightened. Undead protection. At that moment, a gigantic barrier appeared right before Andrew's face. This was a level 3 forbidden curse. Out of every single defensive magic he knew, this was the strongest of them all. Bam! In the next instant, the barrier shattered completely. The spear of undead bolted right through Andrew's body subsequently and continued its flight far into the distance, before finally pinning itself deep into a wall. So strong. The Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect looked at everything before him with wide open eyes. He had not expected that such a horrifying enemy would be suppressed with such ease. Heaven and Earth sect, Lin Fan. When he thought more into that name, the face of the Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect took a stark change as though he could barely believe it. Wasn't that the powerful being that had the entire Kunlun God sect suppressed? He was the powerful being that even White Saint of the Kunlun God sect had to admit defeat against. But, who would have thought that this guy would have appeared here as well? The gigantic dragon that was at the side flapped its wings furiously as though it was completely stumped by this scene before him. Dragon Knight Jace's brows furrowed up as though he could not believe everything before him. To think that this indigenous being would be this strong. He knew of Andrew's strength personally, but to think that this other party could take him down with such ease. Standing there, Lin Fan surveyed his surroundings. Indeed, things were just as he had thought of them to be. This was truly a necromancer. Otherwise, there was no other way he could possibly summon those skeletons and revive these dead people such that they would become battle tools for him. As for that gigantic dragon up there, wasn't that just the dragons in the Western worlds? That guy clad in an armor and standing right on top of it with a spear must definitely be a dragon knight then. In Lin Fan's eyes, things were truly starting to get more interesting right now. Honestly, how everything was going to play out would be anyone's guess from now on. At that moment, a series of laughter trawled over from the distance. To think that this indigenous being would actually possess such strength. That's truly fascinating. For some reason, Andrew, who had his entire body had suddenly pierced through, made his way back perfectly fine and dandy. That hole through his chest had not affected him in any way at all. Seemed like this should be where the power of necromancers lay. Dragon Knight Jace called out, Andrew, don't get too careless now. The strength of this being is extremely strong. How about joining forces? There's no need. For a mere indigenous being of this caliber, why would we even need to join forces? Andrew declared confidently. At the same time, those lifeless eyes of his suddenly started shining with a weird glint. Fascinating. This was truly way too fascinating. With that, Andrew looked over at Lin Fan carefully and revealed his dark, black teeth. Indigenous being, you are truly strong. But, this should end here. Lin Fan's lips curled into a grin. Interesting. Andrew raised his wand up high. Oh, almighty undead god. Bam. Right at the moment Andrew was chanting his incantation, Lin Fan disappeared right where he was. When he next appeared, he was right above Andrew, stamping down with his feet. You despicable indigenous being, how could you choose to strike at this moment? Being trampled down by that foot, Andrew was extremely infuriated. Despicable. This was simply way too despicable. He hadn't even chanted his incantation to its end. Lin Fan's brows knitted out. Are you some brain-dead FCK or something? Who in the world would wait for you to finish chanting in a battle? You're a necromancer, and I am the so-called assassin in your world then. To think that a mere wizard would dare to challenge an assassin. Are you stupid or what? Lin Fan declared in disdain. Andrew was stumped, as though he had yet to recover from his senses. How do you know about these things? He had not expected that this indigenous being would know that he was a necromancer. He even knew of the term assassin. This was something that was absolutely impossible in his eyes. Get lost. At that moment, Dragon Knight Jace suddenly raised his spear and pierced right down at Lin Fan. The twisting power slamming out of the spear caused the entire void to distort in its presence. Raising his hand high, Lin Fan grabbed the tip of the spear before turning his head over. Dragon Knight. Dragon Knight Jace's face changed. You. Roar. The gigantic dragon that Dragon Knight Jace was riding on could no longer bear with it as it spat out with a fiery dragon's breath. While Lin Fan's lips curled into a smirk, Andrew was the one who was yelping out in fright. I'm still under his foot. FWOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO even that firm and resolute ground was giving off a sizzling sound while being burned up. When Dragon Knight Jace caught sight of this, his heart tightened a little, wondering what the situation was like right now. No-vel-be-in.c-om. He did not know whether that indigenous being had died because of this. However, he firmly believed that there was no one in his world who could remain alive after receiving that fiery dragon's breath of his gigantic dragon, even he himself could not do it. So, this is a dragon's breath. Bloody hell, it stinks. A voice rang out from within that fiery dragon's breath. Stop it, stop it. Andrew was wailing out as though he was taking an incredible amount of damage from this. In the next moment, the dragon's breath dissipated. There was nothing wrong with Lin Fan. In fact, there wasn't even a single inch of his body that was damaged from head to toe. However, the same could not be said for that Andrew, who was trampled down by Lin Fan's foot. He was in an absolutely wretched state. His skin had burned off into bits and pieces, revealing the chilling sight of his white bones. How could you do this? Andrew spoke up as the charred skin on his lips dropped off. Everything within his mouth could be seen with extreme clarity, which was quite horrifying. Dragon Knight Jace's heart was beyond astounded right now. He truly could not believe that this indigenous being could be this strong. Andrew yelled out hoarsely, "Go! Attack!" Boom! That gigantic army of undead spirits gushed out at Lin Fan like a swarm of locusts. Looking at everything before him, Lin Fan opened his mouth. Heavenly Dragon's music. A formidable soundwave burst forth from Lin Fan's mouth, quaking the entire heaven and earth. Under the might of this tremendous impact, that entire undead spirit's army was disintegrated without a single chance of fighting back at all. Looking at everything before him, Andrew's face shone with a look of unparalleled horror. I'll sacrifice everything of me, and my only request is for the descent of my master. With that, Andrew's absolutely chilling voice right now permeated out into the void, generating an absolute might. All of a sudden, Lin Fan raised his head as he could feel some formidable power approaching from within the endless void. He took a step back furiously. There was no way these two fellas were going to escape from him. But, he did not expect that this necromancer would still have a technique as such up his sleeves. Was he trying to summon some sort of a mighty powerful being or something? Or rather, a master god? At that moment, Lin Fan was bubbling with anticipation. Chapter 1098. Are you guys joking with me? Chapter 1098. Are you guys joking with me? At this moment, Dragon Knight Jace was retreating far, far away. To think that Andrew would go crazy enough to sacrifice himself and summon down the undead Master God's descent. Even though there was no way he could possibly have the undead Master God descend fully, just his clone alone would be extremely formidable. Master Gods were utmost and unrivaled, there was nothing they could not do. Oh, mighty Master, descend upon us. Andrew was extremely wretched right now. The dragon breath of that gigantic dragon made Andrew question his entire life altogether. The corrosive power of that dragon breath was eating out at his body. The strength of this indigenous being was way too strong. He had to sacrifice his body to the mighty master so that he could call upon the latter's powers. Lin Fan, on the other hand, was somewhat excited right now. Based on Andrew's actions, this should mean that his master was about to descend. Lin Fan wondered how strong the latter would actually be. That thought alone had him feeling pretty excited, to be honest. The Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect stood forth, wanting to fight shoulder to shoulder with Lin Fan in battle. However, to Lin Fan, this guy was just being nothing more than a burden. You leave this place first. Head over to the Heaven and Earth sect and report to them everything that has happened here. Lin Fan took out a pill for him to consume, helping his wounds heal up instantly. The young man did not hesitate at all as he dove right into the void to head over to the Heaven and Earth sect. The situation in the Endless Mainland was only getting more interesting with time right now. Not only were enemies descending upon them, they were even from those Western fantasy worlds that he had known of in the past. Gigantic dragons, necromancers, etc. Lin Fan wondered what sort of fun these guys would bring about. All of a sudden, the entire void tore apart as a gigantic black hole appeared above everyone's heads. Within that gigantic black hole was a boundless power gushing out, coiling throughout the entire heaven and earth. At the same time, the aura of death burst forth rampantly. At the entrance of the black hole were countless undead spirits that were floating around while wailing out. This powerful being that is about to descend is definitely of a higher cultivation state than an immortal lord. Lin Fan's heart tensed up slightly, evidently not expecting that the other side would have a powerful being of this level as well. In the Endless Mainland, the strongest powerful beings existing right now were the immortal kings. As for the heavenly lords, there was no trace of them at all. Even Lin Fan himself had never caught sight of a heavenly lord yet. If that Western world could have a powerful being of the immortal king state, that would be quite something now. Boom, and just as Lin Fan was pondering over that, a horrifying aura erupted. Unable to withstand this tremendous power, everything in the surroundings was devastated. As for Lin Fan, he just raised his head without any signs of uneasiness. Just what could it be? At that moment, a black robe appeared. Under the black hole, the black robe was fluttering randomly. When that boundless might descended down from the heavens, it seemed as though a true god was descending, filling the entire world with its might. Any common peasants would all have to bow down in subservience under this aura. Underneath the robe were two golden flames that were burning just like eyes, flickering with a frightening glow. The aura emitted from it was absolutely chilling to behold. Mortal, I am the undead master god. A metallic voice traveled from beneath those black robes. This was an icy cold voice, without any emotions at all. Lin Fan took a quick glance, having a slight idea about what was going on. This was a projection through his consciousness. The cultivation base of the undead master god should be at the immortal king state. When Dragon Knight Jace caught sight of this clone of the undead master god, even he bowed down that arrogant head of his. While his faith was not toward the latter, the might of any master god was not to be trampled upon. One must always maintain a respectful heart toward them at every moment. Interesting, Lin Fan acknowledged while producing a supreme-grade immortal weapon on his palm before bending his body over and hurling it over to the undead master god. Here's a treasure for you. Lin Fan chuckled out as the supreme-grade immortal weapon flew over through the void. The hand of the undead master god which was hidden beneath that black robe reached out and grabbed at the item. Mortal, just as the undead master god spoke up, something horrifying happened. Explode. Bam, the supreme-grade immortal weapon blew up right away. Right now, Lin Fan wanted to see just what sort of damage this would deal to the undead master god. Perhaps, something unexpected might come out of it. The might of a supreme-grade immortal weapon's self-destruction was far from normal. This was something that could cause gods and ghosts alike to cry out. Being so close to the impact zone, the black hole was nearly destroyed by it entirely. Seems like it's just that little bit off. After this experiment, Lin Fan understood the situation fully. Expecting a supreme-grade immortal weapon to deal damage to any powerful beings of immortal king state was still too much of a forced attempt. The undead master god beneath the black robes was only blown up a little, without sustaining anything really heavy. When Dragon Knight Jace caught sight of this scene, he was scared frozen for a moment or so. He had not expected that this indigenous being would dare to strike out at a master god. These were some bold guts he had right there. Mortal, how dare you be disrespectful to a master god? The undead master god roared out as those flames at his eyes burned even more furiously, filled with an endless wrath. Right now, Lin Fan's cultivation base was at the immortal lord state. There was still quite a bit of a difference between him and an immortal king. However, this was only a mere clone of the undead master god, so Lin Fan was totally unfazed in the slightest bit. If this were the true body that had descended, Lin Fan's interest might have been piqued slightly. But now, this was pretty boring. The undead master god was incensed right now as his boundless rage surged across the heaven and earth, as though it was bent on incinerating the entire world completely. You ought to go down to hell. Instantly, level 9 forbidden curses appeared in front of the undead master god one after another. Undead heavenly punishment, darkness heaven screen. ... In the blink of an eye, all of these super forbidden curses were laid out between the heaven and earth. Boom, the entire sky turned pitch black, with thick, dark thunderbolts crackling out. It was as though the entire world had turned into a world of darkness. Undead Master God, if this were your true body that had descended, I might have actually found things being a little bothersome to deal with. But now that it's merely a clone of yours that has appeared, there's no chance of you winning at all. Lin Fan spoke out calmly, unbothered by the existence of the other party entirely. This was a battle between mystic skills and magic. Interesting. Slay. A single sword was slashed out. With that, the clone of the undead Master God was sliced apart right away. Lin Fan glared up into the void fixedly. Did this fella think that he was the Lin Fan of the past? Right now, he was already an immortal Lord State being. If he could not even destroy a single clone of an immortal king, how was he going to reign over the world? If this were the true body that had appeared and intended on fighting Lin Fan head-on, he might not be a match for the other party given those circumstances. However, he was someone with the Lin brand soap. If he truly couldn't fuck the other party over, all he had to do was to just throw a bar of soap over them. That would surely solve any bit of problem there would be. But of course, there were only 2 chances left on the Lin brand soap. He had to make use of them wisely. If he were to use them on some unnecessary targets, then he would be taking a hell of a loss. Mortal, just you wait, I will descend personally. The voice of the undead Master God sounded over, filled with an endless hatred toward Lin Fan. Lin Fan merely shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly before turning his gaze over at that last remaining being in the area, Dragon Knight Jace. When Dragon Knight Jace caught sight of Lin Fan's gaze, he felt his heart skip a beat. Dragon Knights do not know of retreat. Even if we can't match up to the other party, we will never back down. Kill, Jace howled out, wanting to ride on his gigantic dragon. But to his horror, his gigantic dragon had decided to run off straightaway without even giving him a chance. Aurea, Jace screamed out. However, that gigantic dragon flew away without even turning back. Well, it was true that Jace had the spirit of a dragon knight. However, the dragon didn't have that for sure. It was a bloody gigantic dragon, one that held a noble bloodline of the gigantic dragons. How could it possibly die here? When Lin Fan caught sight of everything, he could not help but break out into a stifled laugh. Were these guys FC King playing out a comedy sketch to make him laugh? Chapter 1099 Hypocrisy. Chapter 1099, Hypocrisy. This was the first time Lin Fan was not prepared to eradicate the enemy down to the very last being. Allowing that gigantic dragon to escape might not be that bad of a deal as well. Who knew, he might be able to lure back a bigger group. Stop shouting now. Hell, I'm even feeling embarrassed for you. Bloody hell, calling yourself a dragon knight and whatnot. Even your dragon has abandoned you. You might as well change your name. Lin Fan sighed out, feeling a huge ton of sympathy for this fella. There goes a fine dragon abandoning him just like that. If anyone was in his place, they would definitely find it absolutely unbearable as well. Aurea, you are not fit to be a battle comrade of the great Jace. From this day forth, I, Dragon Knight Jace, shall officially sever all ties of comradeship with Aurea. Dragon Knight Jace roared out in shame and fury. After that, as though he had suffered some tremendous blow, he clutched at his chest in pain and declared. Then, he cast his sights toward Lin Fan and said, I, Dragon Knight Jace, will definitely not fear an indigenous being such as yourself. Prepare to die. Dragon Knight's battle technique, Whirlwind. Jace raised the spear in his hand up high and leapt up. With that, his entire body was wrapped up by a dragon whirlwind as he bolted out toward Lin Fan. I, Dragon Knight Jace, am the strongest, loftiest, and bravest dragon knight in the entire Moon Shadow mainland. Even though you are extremely strong, indigenous being, I am not afraid of you. The Dragon Knight Jace roared out, making it seem as though his image was absolutely high up and incomparable. He was sounding as if other than Lin Fan, there was no one else in the world who could stand up against him. Lin Fan merely stood there and blinked his eye. Was this guy a moron or something? As he deployed his battle technique, the Dragon Knight Jace was wrapped by a whirlwind completely. Toward an opponent as such, Lin Fan was too lazy to even slap him to death. His strength was simply way too weak. Even if Lin Fan were to slap this guy to death, it would do nothing for him at all. Although, he could definitely capture this guy over and have him purified. He could then take a look at just what was up in the Moon Shadow mainland, and how many people they had sent for this invasion into the Endless mainland. Get over here, Lin Fan spoke up and grabbed out at that whirlwind straight away. All of a sudden, Lin Fan could feel some feedback coming from the void around him. I, Dragon Knight Jace, have never ever known fear. However, you better stay there and wait. Once I get stronger, I'm going to come and have my revenge. Peok, the whirlwind dissipated, and a scroll dropped from within. Looking at the scroll, Lin Fan picked it over. Ding, discovered used teleportation scroll. Lin Fan tossed it away immediately as he looked into the distance with a gaze of disdain, so damned bloody shameless. Good and evil Buddha sect. The boundless future Buddha Lord looked down at the entire world with a contemptuous look on his face, gazing into the distance. As he opened his palm, 10 Buddha Lords were seen sitting down cross-legged in the deepest parts of his palm. These 10 Buddha Lords were linked with chains one after another, causing a mysterious Buddhist power to infuse into the body of the boundless future Buddha Lord from them. The Tao of the Heavenly Lord is one that is boundless without limits, profound with an infinite depth. It isn't something that you can enter just by depending on the evil path. Ancestor Master, you have entered the path of the devil. The Buddha Lords who were seated cross-legged within his palm called out. Closing his palms together, the boundless future Buddha Lord snorted out coldly before entering the void and heading toward the direction of the ocean of death, leaving a golden brilliance in its wake. Soon, the boundless future Buddha Lord arrived at the ocean of death. Walking into it, the dimensional portal activated, teleporting him right to the Moon Shadow mainland. This was a new world right here, bearing a completely different outlook from the endless mainland. Amitabha, looking at the countless of living beings here, the boundless future Buddha Lord muttered out the Buddhist chant softly, sending a boundless Buddhist light seeping right into the heaven and earth. It was as though the light was trying to envelop the entire world within it. However, all of a sudden, the boundless Buddha light seemed as though it was repelled by an obstruction of sorts, sending it bouncing and shrinking back into his body. Lin Fan waited at the ruins of the Sword Chi sect for several days. However, he saw no enemies arriving. Bored of it, he finally left the place. Boring. This was truly way too boring. To think that they wouldn't send any reinforcements even after a few days. Heaven and Earth sect. After returning, Lin Fan headed over to look for the Old Master right away. Old Master, I bumped into those outsiders once again. At the same time, I had a huge fight with one of the clones of the undead Master God. I reckon that the strongest powers amongst those outsiders should be those Master Gods of theirs. They should also be of immortal king states. Lin Fan said. Zheng Yangtian had already known of these affairs. After you left, I went over to some of the other sects and requested to browse through their records as well. At the same time, I went to visit some of the hermit seniors of the immortal king state as well. I've already found out the reason behind everything. The Moon Shadow mainland is the place where these outsiders come from, a place which exists over the ocean of death. Lin Fan nodded his head. Old Master, should we take the initiative to head over and strike at them so that we can give them a good beatdown right away? This was the very plan that Lin Fan had. Since the other party had already come knocking, why not just strike back at them directly? Who knew, they might even stand to gain something out of it. Zheng Yangtian looked at Lin Fan before shaking his head. Impossible. The other side is way too strong. As for our sect, all the sects are divided, all fending for themselves. Unless we're united, there's most likely no way for us to defend against them at all. I've already informed the other major sects regarding this affair now. I'm sure they should understand what we should do. Zheng Yangtian replied. With a situation as such, Lin Fan did not bear too much hope. Given those people right now, how could they possibly unite? This was especially the case for the Kunlun God sect. If they were willing to join hands, that would be akin to bumping into ghosts right now. Amitabha. At that moment, a Buddhist voice traveled over. Good and evil Buddha sect. A tear appeared in the void from within the depths of the sect as a figure walked out. Looking at that fella, Lin Fan was somewhat taken aback. It's you. He had not expected that it would be the boundless future Buddha Lord. How in the world did this fella manage to get out? Zheng Yangtian's brows furrowed as he put up his guard right away. He knew of all the old masters from the good and evil Buddha sect. But this guy here. Old Master, watch out. This is the boundless future Buddha Lord. He FCKED me over once in the past. To think that he would have gotten out. Lin Fan remarked. But, Lin Fan soon realized that this was merely a trace of the boundless future Buddha Lord's consciousness. Zheng Yangtian, the reason for your Buddha Lord's arrival here this time around is to clarify a certain matter. The affairs regarding the Shadow Moon mainland is not something that concerns the Heaven and Earth sect. After everything is done with, there will naturally be an encounter available for the Heaven and Earth sect. The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up. Does not concern your mother. Bloody bald monk, how in the world did you get out? Lin Fan scolded him the moment he saw him. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of Lin Fan, he let out a slightly benevolent look. Ah, it's you, benefactor. Your Buddha Lord greets you politely. FCK, don't come here and act so hypocritically, you bloody devious bald monk. Your daddy is here to tell you that I'm definitely going to take this matter into my hands. As long as they dare to come, I'll destroy every single wave that they dare to send over. Lin Fan barked out angrily. And also, bald monk, if you have got the bloody guts, send your true body over. Do you believe me when I say your daddy is going to whip you badly into shape? Lin Fan continued. Benefactor, that's insolent now. The tone of the boundless future Buddha Lord turned frosty. Initially, he wanted to strike out, but he then suddenly broke out into a faint smile. Benefactor, we'll meet again should affinity will it. F***CK, you wanna run? Not so easy, Lin Fan hollered out as he threw a supreme grade immortal weapon over. Self-destruct. Zheng Yangtian was startled. Don't. Bam, the depths of the sect began to quake. Gosh, lad, couldn't you wait? This place is extremely fragile, and cannot withstand the self-destruction of a supreme grade immortal weapon. Amitabha, the face of the boundless future Buddha Lord was still expressionless. Casting a final deep gaze over at Lin Fan, he dove into the void and got out of this place. HMPH, you're lucky you got away fast. Lin Fan scolded out. Zheng Yangtian looked over at that area in the void where the boundless future Buddha Lord was standing moments earlier. Be careful from now on. That person's cultivation state is even higher than mine. He's most likely an ancient immortal king. That is an existence not to be underestimated. N-O-V-E in .C Om. Lin Fan nodded his head. He knew that the boundless future Buddha Lord was extremely strong. However, he wasn't afraid of him in the slightest bit. No matter what, the last chance of that soap was definitely saved for this guy here. This boundless future Buddha Lord had better start praying that he didn't bump into Lin Fan ever. Chapter 1100 really bumped into a ghost. Chapter 1100 really bumped into a ghost. The boundless future Buddha Lord had left by now. However, that encounter had allowed Lin Fan to understand that the former must have conspired with those people from the side of the Moon Shadow mainland. Otherwise, there was no other reason why he would appear before them and request for them to not get involved in that matter. But of course, how could Lin Fan agree to something like that? And, to think that that fellow would have the cheek to dare appear before him once again. He was simply asking to die. If the other party had descended with his true body, that soap of Lin Fan would definitely not stand on courtesy and give him a welcome greeting to let him know just how powerful it was. Zheng Yangtian did not know about the background of this boundless future Buddha Lord, the main reason being that the latter had existed from a time even earlier than Zheng Yangtian himself. At the same time, he was gravely injured and had lived like a hermit without revealing himself to the rest of the world for long. Therefore, there was naturally no one who had any idea of who he was at all. It was the same for Selfless Demon Ancestor. After being confined for dozens of thousands of years, who in the world would actually know of his background anymore? Unless they were beings who were familiar with the history of those times back then, most people would definitely not know of anything at all. Lin Fan, you've got to be careful, Zheng Yangtian said. Lin Fan nodded his head. Don't worry, old master. I know that in my heart. Lin Fan was not entirely clear about what the situation was like right now. But, given the way the circumstances looked, it didn't seem like there was no one in the Endless Mainland who knew about those of the Moon Shadow mainland. The boundless future Buddha Lord was clearly someone who knew about them. And if that were the case, there must be quite a number of other people who knew of it as well. After leaving the depths of the sect, Lin Fan found the Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect. Right now, the Sword Chi sect could have been considered to have perished entirely. The remaining few disciples had only managed to escape with the help of an immortal weapon. Lin Fan wanted to know exactly in which direction those Western fantasy-styled fellas had appeared from. The ocean of death was extremely huge, and lined the entire border of the Endless Mainland. If he wanted to just slowly search that line to look for those people from the Moon Shadow mainland, that would be more difficult than difficult itself. Therefore, Lin Fan had to ask for a general picture from the Grand Master of the Sword Chi sect. And indeed, the answer he got eventually did not disappoint him at all. At the same time, when he recalled the situation with the 100-Flower sect, Lin Fan came to a single conclusion. Since the 100-Flower sect and the Sword Chi sect were located really close to one another, this could only mean one thing: those people from the Moon Shadow mainland were all gathered around a single area. Without waiting any longer, Lin Fan dove right into the void and headed over to that area. He wanted to see for himself just what was going on with the other side. And, if he could investigate and make out their background, things couldn't get any better then. He arrived at the place where the 100-Flower sect once resided. After being crushed by that gigantic palm of Lin Fan, there was an enormous handprint embedded into the ground. He then looked over into the distance ahead. 1,000 miles ahead was where the Sword Chi sect used to exist. And, in front of both of these sects was the Ocean of Death. Pishu, a figure sped through the void. Given Lin Fan's current speed, a distance of 1,000 miles was something that he could cover in the mere blink of an eye. Moreover, immortal king state beings would even be able to descend their consciousness through a single thought. Even reaching the edge of the world instantly wouldn't pose an issue at all. Boom, an explosion sounded out in the distance. Lin Fan knew that this must be the place that he was searching for. Diving into the void, he entered his stealth mode and retracted his aura, making sure that there was no sign of activity from him. Creeping ahead stealthily, when he caught sight of what was before him, Lin Fan was astounded. Holy FCK, so many people. Lin Fan was beyond surprised right now, as though he had just seen a ghost. Right now, on the shores of the Ocean of Death was shining a pentagon star with a continuous light. Each time it shone, there would be a large army that would appear. The strength of these armies was far from ordinary. Supreme state beings, immemorial ancient state beings, true immortals, mystic immortals, golden immortals, ancestor immortals, etc., all were present. Horrifying. A single look over and Lin Fan could tell that they amounted to a couple 100 million at least. His heart froze up, feeling that everything was way too terrifying for him to even begin imagining. How many disciples did the Heaven and Earth sect have? Even if he were to add everyone in, the very most that they had would be 1 million. And that was already quite a significant amount. Even if they were to add in some of the other sects, being able to reach 100 million in numbers was practically the limits for them. The Endless Mainland had a rather large population as well. But, the main point was that these people before Lin Fan right now possessed an extremely incredible amount of strength. If they were let loose in the Endless Mainland, they themselves would already be extremely horrifying existences. But, the scariest thing was that this was not all there was to it. That pentagram star was still shining and flashing out relentlessly. Who knew how many of them there would be eventually? November LBJNN. In any case, Lin Fan was truly taken aback by this situation. He did not know just how many people from the Endless Mainland were going to come over. At that moment, Lin Fan's gaze was suddenly attracted towards some people. Those were people of the Endless Mainland. And by the looks of it, they seemed to be from some sect or something. Lin Fan's brows furrowed, feeling a little heated over this. To think that some of the sects would actually betray them. These sects were not major sects, all of them were just some small sects. There was no way the major sects of the Endless Mainland would actually collude with these people of the Moon Shadow mainland. Even the most evils of all sects would not find themselves defecting over to the Moon Shadow mainland. Amitabha. At that moment, a Buddhist light shone out within the void. Lin Fan knew that it was the boundless future Buddha Lord. Therefore, he focused his spirits and did not dare to let even a single trace of his presence slip out. Even though he had the soap on hand, he still had to be more cautious with his actions. Before he had 100% confidence toward the situation, there was no way he was going to use the soap just like that. He did not know what the boundless future Buddha Lord was doing. He seemed as though he was just patiently waiting for something to happen. At that moment, a bright power burst forth from the Pentagon star. This beam of light was pure and radiant, illuminating the entire world in its glory. It was as though this was the holiest light that had ever appeared in the world. At that moment, the void above the Pentagon star gave birth to a pristine and exquisite gate of heaven. With a single creak, this snow-white gate of heaven opened up as the countless living beings down below knelt down to welcome its arrival. A saintly glow spilled out into the world and landed onto the bodies of those followers. Immediately, the faces of those followers were filled with a look of bliss as though they were craving for nothing more than this light. At that moment, a figure walked out of the gate of heaven, with a saintly glow emitting off its back as 36 pairs of wings spread out to cover the entire sky, majestic and holy beyond anything else. The radiant Master God had descended down upon the world. His might was torrential, such that one could not even raise a single bit of will to resist him. On the sides of the radiant Master God were radiant angels appearing one after another. Every single angel seemed like the most sacred apostles, spreading and announcing the brilliant and godly wisdom of the radiant Master God. The boundless future Buddha Lord chuckled out, to think that they would have you come first. Could it be for you to come and discuss some wisdom of the Tao with your Buddha Lord here? The dignified yet sacred face of the radiant Master God turned around and looked over at the boundless future Buddha Lord. Well, for you, the radiant Master God, to open up the paths for the 72 Master Gods, I don't reckon that's a bad thing either. After all, your radiant laws could match up with my Buddha sect. How about we make a wager? The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up. All right, the radiant Master God nodded his head. Lin Fan had been eavesdropping on the conversation between the two of them the entire time. Right now, he felt a bit of astonishment in his heart. To think that there would truly be a Master God appearing here, and the radiant Master God at that. The radiant Master God of the God race was someone who was claimed to be in possession of a 1,000,000-men-strong army. Just those angels that were surrounding him were already innumerable, creating a horrifying sight. Buddha is merciful and will purify the masses. Benefactor, why would you have to do this? At that moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord sighed out softly as he pointed a finger over at the spot where Lin Fan was hiding. A tremendous power of Buddha sliced through the heaven and earth, bringing with it an unrivaled might. When Lin Fan caught sight of that, he was totally shocked as though he had just seen a ghost. How the hell did that fella know he was there? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Radiant Sacred Hall, Eternal Light. At that moment, the radiant Master God made his move as well. The 36 pairs of white wings behind him flapped out gently as a sacred burst of light shot forth, shrouding the entire heaven and earth. Right then, Lin Fan was so scared that his soul was literally shocked out of him. Bloody Mother Sea King Hell, he had really bumped into a ghost.